Welcome, folks, to our 18th annual event at PDAC. This is the Brazil-Canada Chamber of Commerce event that we are hosting with Adimbi as well as the Brazilian Consulate in Toronto. We're very grateful for their partnership with us. They've been very helpful. They've been forthcoming with advice and more advice and then some more advice, and some money. So it's been great to have working with them. We're very, very happy that you're all here. I'm Peter Hawkins. I'm the co-chair of the Brazil-Canada Chamber of Commerce, and with me is Dan Rosica, who is my other co-chair. And as we always start events, one thing we do like to recognize is, of course, where we are. And a lot of people say land acknowledgements are tired and they don't mean anything. I actually come from New Brunswick. I come from the land of the Maliseet. And when I was growing up as a kid, I didn't actually know any Native people. They were completely segregated from me. And it took years for me to understand that we have to honor where we come from. So right now, I'd like to acknowledge that we are in the land that is part of the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the territory of the Anishinaabeg, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Ojibwe Chippewa peoples, home to the Métis and most recently, the territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. We are grateful to live and work and have the opportunity to stay on this land. We also at the BCCC have a diversity, equity, and inclusion statement. It is our mantra. We begin our meetings with this to remind us that we try to make everything accessible to everyone. Together we stand as leaders embracing diversity, equity, and inclusion. We recognize that DEI is not just the right thing to do, but essential for our organization's success. We lead the change, understanding that diversity and inclusion practices must permeate all aspects of our business. By weaving DEI into the fabric of our organization, we cultivate an environment where every individual thrives and feels a sense of belonging, innovation, flourishes, and collective potential is realized. Let us forge ahead, united in our mission to create a diverse and inclusive future that transcends boundaries and elevates us all. That statement was developed by our Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Committee with Jamili Cruz and Laura Method created this wonderful mantra, and we urge everyone to take those thoughts at heart. Now I'm going to send it over to Dan to say a few words.
All right. Welcome, everybody. Bem-vindo a todos. It's great to be back yet again, and my job is to thank our generous sponsors. So, for platinum sponsors, again, we have Vale, so we have a nice big table, and thanks to Olga for coming out. We have the TMX, who provides through Guillaume and this beautiful place that we get to do the event here today. I remember years ago it was much, much smaller than this, and certainly not nearly as nice. So thank you very much to TSX. Alvarez and Marshall, a new sponsor, so welcome to you. Miller Thompson, who will be at their beautiful space on Tuesday. Gold sponsor, Peter never mentions his own company, but Mellowhawk Logistics. Peter, without him, the chamber probably wouldn't even be running, so thank you, Peter. Wheaton Precious Metals, who's been a long-term supporter. Aero Copper with Mako, another long-term supporter, so thank you, Aero Copper. Proactiva with Rafael Benke, who we're going to hear from a little bit later on. 4B Mining with Fred, who everybody probably knows, but I think he's in Barcelona this week, doing something different for a change. Our silver sponsors, a new Itafos. Stephen's going to be speaking on Tuesday. BMA Advogados, C. Steinwing Group, who I had the pleasure of meeting last night and learning about their business. That was really exciting. And Kinross, who we work with closely. I remember working at Kinross many years ago, so nice to have Kinross on board. And our partners for the BCC PDAC event, the Consulate General of Brazil in Toronto, who always gives excellent support to our events, so thank you to Vanja. And of course, Peter mentioned Jimby, so with that, I'll pass it back to you, Peter.
Thank you. And of course, I want to recognize some of the important people we have in the room. We're very honored that we have His Excellency Ambassador Carlos França here from the Embassy in Ottawa. We have Ambassador Vanja, who of course, as you all know, is our Diplomat of the Decade. And we're very happy, of course, to have Guillaume Lagaré because we are in his house. So Guillaume, can you come and say a few opening words for us, please?
Bon dia a todos. Welcome home to TMX. It's good to be back in Toronto. I'm Guillaume Legaré. I'm based in Sao Paulo for the TSX and the TSX venture. It's been an interesting year. It will be an interesting conference for us at PDAC to talk about Brazil, talk about LATAM, And it's certainly good to see that February and March are much warmer than expected in Toronto for the Brazilians. So I remember 2 years ago we had the PDAC in June, and people were complaining that we would come back to a PDAC in March. So we had kind of a compromise this year that we have a bit of a warmer weather. So welcome everyone. It's great to have Brazil at PDAC. It's great to see how Brazil has evolved over the years and how we can better position Brazil in front of investors and key stakeholders in the Canadian market. So this week we have great discussions around the sector. As you know, LATAM is the most important market that we have outside of Canada. In Latin America, we have over 400 companies that are listed on TSX and TSXV, and 1,076 properties from LATAM. So if you think of the global mining sector at TMX, we have over 5,200 properties, and 48% are outside of Canada. And LATAM is the main market outside of Canada. And Brazil is pretty good. We have 35 TSX, TSXV issuers with 95 properties listed on TSX and TSXV. But obviously, we want to achieve more in Brazil with you and the ecosystem, working at PDAC and working also from Brazil. We have this week also Leonardo Rezende from B3 that is here at PDAC. So it's a pleasure to work with B3 to try to find solutions for the local market also in Brazil. So we will be working with all of you, and certainly this PDAC is a good opportunity to talk about the positive things in the mining sector, because there are some things that are positive. We believe that the junior sector will continue to grow. We just launched last week our TSX Venture 50 results for 2023, and mining sector was an important, the results were quite impressive for the mining sector, and we had two companies that have assets in Brazil, G Mining that has assets in Brazil, and also Lavras Gold from Brazil at one of the top 10 performers on the TSX Venture 50 program. Actually, G Mining upgraded to the TSX recently. But just to give you an example that we have quality assets, quality management teams from Brazil. We believe in the junior mining sector. We have over close to 1,000 junior mining companies listed on TSX Venture. And so we believe that this is something we can do to help grow the mining sector in Brazil. So I wish you a productive conference today. I'll be around if you have any questions. And I think there's an interesting Brazil agenda this week. There's a market open on Tuesday morning, the 5th, around 8:30. We're going to open the market. I think Brazil will have an important delegation. And also to help this dialogue with Brazil and our issuers and our stakeholders, we're planning our first CEO roundtable on Wednesday, the 6th in the morning, so in our TMX boardroom. So this will be important to discuss how we can help move the sector forward. So it's a pleasure to have you here, all in Toronto at TMX. Have fun and have a productive event today. Thank you for the invitation, and congratulations to BCCC for being such in a leadership role in bringing everyone together. Thanks to Carolina, also my colleague at TMX, for putting all this together, and the TMX Market Center team. And have fun, everyone. Have a good breakfast. Thank you.
I also want to make sure that we recognize and welcome, of course, the enormous and wonderful Brazilian delegation. So led by Mauro Souza, thank you so much. Also with Marcos Gonçalves, who is the president of ADIMBI. We have Pedro Paulo and Rodrigo Cotta from BNDES here, and many mining companies. We're really excited to have you all. Flavio Mota will be speaking later too. We're looking forward to that. So now I'd like to bring up Ambassador Vanja to say a few words. And over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you. Good morning, bom dia, bonjour à tous et à toutes. It's a great pleasure to be here once more to the Brazil-Canada Mining Brunch. Thank you very much, ESX. I think Guillaume made an excellent speech and put the right words on this event. It's so important to be here to make business, and it is a perfect environment for networking. So first of all, enjoy your best. It makes a lot of difference to have the BCCC with us. And I'd like to thank you very much for the support that we have received through the years. And it's amazing that now PDAC this year celebrates the 92nd edition and is growing every year. And this year we have apparently we have 25,000 delegates from 130 countries. And the Brazilian delegation is broke again its record. Apparently there is more than 120 delegates this year. So a lot of people to make business and shows only the interest that Brazil presents to Canada and vice versa. I don't want to make any long speech. I would like that you start doing your business. But before I go, there's something that I would like to do is to publicly recognize the work that the BCCC has been doing. And I'd like for this to invite our ambassador, Carlos França, the ambassador of Brazil to Canada, to, together with me, to present to the BCCC the highest command that Brazil gives to one institution, is the Ordem do Rio Branco. This is the diploma that I will give, and I'd like to show first. So as I said, it's the highest recognition given by Brazilian state to individuals and institutions. And this one goes to BCCC for its 50th continuous work. In 2023, BCCC celebrated half a century of working. And the partnership that we have, it's unbelievable. And that's the best way to do a good work. Is not only represent the best interests of Brazil in Canada, but Canada in Brazil. So in the person of the co-chairs, Daniel Risica and Peter Hawkins, I would like to present the command. But I also would like to invite someone that committed 9 years of her work to the BCCC, construct a wonderful relationship with the government and with the business people. I'd like to invite you, Carolina Albornoz, to be here to receive this command as well. And I'd like to invite Ambassador Carlos França together with me to give the, André, please.
Sure.
So
Should we do it on the stage, or do you want to do it here?
In the stage would be better so everybody
Yeah,
could
let's
see.
do it on the stage.
Wonderful. So let's come here.
Thank you so much. Everyone, also please note, we do have simultaneous translation. If you need an earphone, we have earphones over here. So please, because we have lots of important material, I want everyone to know. Thank you so much. Now we have a few words from the ambassador.
Okay.
It's going to, and he's going to grab his notes. I don't blame him. And then we'll carry on with the program. So this is lovely. Thank you. You take it. Everyone, please, His Excellency Ambassador Carlos França. Thank you.
First of all, I'd like to tell that it's a great honor to be here. Thank you so much. And Peter and Mr. Risica, you really deserve this honor that the Brazilian president and the Brazilian Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Mauro Vieira, gave it to you. Very great recognition, but we fully deserved it. Congratulations. Thank you, my dear friend, Ambassador Vanja Nóbrega, Consul General of Brazil in Toronto, Mr. Hawkins, Mr. Risica, Mr. Legardet, for your insightful remarks. I would also like to thank the Brazil-Canada Chamber of Commerce for organizing this edition of the Brazil-Canada Conference, as well as the sponsor whose kind contributions and general efforts made this event possible. Let me just highlight a few points that I believe are relevant. As you are all well aware, trade and investment flows between Brazil and Canada have been growing for the last years. In 2022, for the first time, bilateral trade exceeded $10 billion US. Direct investments similarly increased. Between 2005 and 2006, four largest Brazilian companies entered Canada through the acquisition of local businesses. Gerdau, a steelmaker, or I should say the steelmaker, Ambev, a beer producer, and Vale, which acquired Inco for $17.5 billion US. Big business. At that point, Brazil became the fourth largest direct investor in Canada. Canadian investments in Brazil are also significant. Since the end of the 19th century, Canadian companies have been present in the Brazilian market. I would, of course, mention here one landmark or milestone, that is the founding of Light and Power Company, the São Paulo Tramway Light and Power Company, and the Rio de Janeiro Tramway Light and Power Company, known in Brazil as Light, 1904. After 1912, they became part of the holding Brazilian Traction Light and Power Company, and eventually it changed its name to Brascan, for Brazil plus Canada, Brascan. In 1979, the company diversified to other areas, and it still exists under the name of Brookfield Asset Management. I'd like to mention just a few examples. For example, during the 1940s, Alcan and Massey Ferguson also opened subsidiaries in Brazil, to name but a few. It's interesting to know that Canadian investment in Brazil is seen as so friendly that when I was a teenager, I thought that the Brascan was a Brazilian company, because we have the Bras, it should be a state-owned company, because you feel, that the Canadians' investment really mingles, with the Brazilian companies. They are seen as benign, as very friendly. And I think that it's an asset of the Canadian companies when they invest in Brazil. Not to say Light. In Brazil, we say Light as the Light was, our Light, because it's our company. As we can see, there is a long history of continued mutual investments which have been beneficial to both our countries. I believe that this trend will continue and should become even deeper in the near future. We, Canada and Brazil, are both larger players not only in the Americas, but also globally. Brazil and Canada are among the 10 largest economies in the world. We have much to gain by promoting greater integration of the supply chains in our continent in all fields. But I find this is of particular relevance in mining, which will be in the forefront of the energy transition. I'd like to mention, and I think that Ambassador Vanja will coincide with me, that we are living today, since last year, a moment that's an all-time high in our bilateral relationship. Foreign Minister Jolie visited Brazil last year, visited Brazil this year. We are expecting a official visit of the Foreign Minister, Ambassador Mauro Vieira, to Canada this year. And President Lula has already accepted the invitation of Prime Minister Trudeau to visit Canada as well. So I think that we have, a very good chemistry between our two leaders, and you should profit from this, to advance our agenda in business, to fight against climate change, to the right of indigenous people, and of course, to do, Mr. Hawkins, as much business as we can. The decarbonization of our societies represents a big break for the sector. We have the resources, we have the capital, and the personnel to do it. We should not let this opportunity slip away. Just before finishing here, I'd like to mention the importance of the mining industry to Brazil that can be accessed by its contribution to the Brazilian trade balance. You know, in Brazil, we are celebrating that in 2023 alone, we had the largest trade surplus in our history. Since you have, you know, we start measuring this in 1989, I guess, 2023 marked, you know, the largest trade surplus ever in Brazil. It was $100 billion US. The Brazilian mining industry alone exported in 2023 43 billion US dollars and accounted for a trade surplus of 31.9 billion US dollars, which represents almost 1/3 of the whole trade surplus that was 19.8 billion US dollars. Which does it mean? Well, of course, we say that Brazil, we are an agribusiness that's very strong. We are an agriculture powerhouse. But the agricultural sector accounted for 24% of the trade surplus last year. The mining industry, the mining sector, you know, it was 31.95 billion US dollars. It was 1/3. It was more than the agriculture output, the agriculture sector contributed to our trade surplus. I think that gives the precise idea of the importance of the mining industry in Brazil. And I can tell you that this timely exchange we are about to start will certainly provide good inputs to increase momentum and help us realize the full potential of our already prosperous bilateral relation. I'd like, of course, to thank you all, enjoy the discussion, and please, I would like to acknowledge here the presence of the president of ANDIB, Marcos André Gonçalves, and of course the head of the Brazilian delegation. That was Dr. Mauro Henrique Moreira Souza, that is the head, the president, the director general. I don't know what I think that's director general, you know? But it's from ANM, that's the Brazilian agency, Agência Nacional de Mineração, the Brazilian National Mining Agency. Thank you so much.
And as my mother would say, speak of the devil. Next, we would like to have Dr. Mauro Souza come and give remarks from the Minister of Mines and Energy in Brazil. Please, Dr. Souza.
Good morning, you all. I would like to speak in English, but I don't know how to say. Eu vou falar em português. Bom dia a todos e todas. É um prazer estar aqui. Aliás, é um prazer renovado. Pela terceira vez eu compareço a esta prestigiosa reunião e, preliminarmente, além de agradecer e cumprimentar a todos, especialmente os organizadores do evento, trago aqui as escusas apresentadas pelo Ministro de Estado de Minas e Energia do meu país, do Brasil, assim como pelo Secretário Nacional de Mineração, que ambos tiveram contratempos e não puderam comparecer aqui, mas gostariam de estar presentes. E também faço um disclaimer inicial que a minha fala não se confunde com a fala do governo. Nós temos um zelo pela separação de papéis que temos na nossa estrutura de Estado no país, tá? Mas trago, obviamente, os apontamentos que o ministro gentilmente passou, que dão conta de como nós estamos e temos perspectivas de atuação no setor mineral brasileiro. Tá? Então, este encontro aqui que se renova, ele não se circunscreve a essa relação antiga e muito profícua que tem Brasil e Canadá. É um país que se projeta também para o mundo. O Brasil, que tem uma pujante mineração, agora há pouco o nosso embaixador trouxe alguns números, portanto, eu já vou retirar esses números da minha fala, porque ele trouxe os números, são números interessantes e que tendem a se ampliar bastante. E esse colóquio que se faz aqui, essa interação, esse diálogo, essa troca, essa interação, tem sido fundamentais para que nós possamos também observar o que se faz no mundo e também trazer para o Brasil e também mostrar ao mundo o que o Brasil está fazendo. Então, nós tivemos números importantes no ano passado, há uma perspectiva muito clara de atuação do governo brasileiro em torno do fortalecimento das entidades que orbitam no setor mineral, como é a própria Agência Nacional de Mineração, que eu represento aqui, o Serviço Geológico Brasileiro, que também tem um papel fundamental. Então, nós precisamos realmente ter esse espaço, ter essa oportunidade de conversar, interagir e fazer essa troca, que ela é muito proveitosa para ambos os países. E nós temos aí uma relação centenária, uma relação que tem trazido bons frutos. Como o Canadá tem um histórico e é muito interessante observar como há um culto positivo à mineração, coisa que nós precisamos melhorar no país, que ainda convive com uma imagem muito negativa da mineração. Esse é um dos desafios que o país tem de melhorar a percepção, a credibilidade e como a mineração pode ser vista de um modo diferente, afinal, não há modo de vida atual, não há possibilidade de termos bem-estar social e crescimento econômico, se não pela mineração. A mineração é fundamental. Ontem eu comentei sobre o nosso desafio da transição energética e parece que, finalmente, há uma convergência, uma aproximação do setor de energia com o setor de mineração e, principalmente, na questão das energias renováveis. E aí o Brasil desponta como um potencial incrível e que pode ser explorado, deve ser explorado, deve ser patrocinado. E o nosso papel ali é melhorar, obviamente, o ambiente regulatório, o ambiente de negócios, garantir a estabilidade política, essa estabilidade regulatória que faz com que haja uma atratividade maior para os negócios, para os investimentos no país. Nós temos ainda um outro comportamento no país, que é de uma falta de apetite ao risco em relação às bolsas. Então, nós não buscamos consistentemente, não temos um instrumental que favoreça a financiabilidade de projetos. Daqui a pouco, o nosso colega Flávio, do BNDES, também vai ter a oportunidade de falar sobre o que tem sido feito. Isso também é um esforço de governo, de garantir que haja acesso ao financiamento, às várias formas, às várias possibilidades. No ano passado, aliás, no ano retrasado, nós alteramos a legislação com relação à possibilidade de utilização dos títulos minerários como garantia para o financiamento de empreendimentos. Isso é um salto. Agora, uma coisa está posto na lei, a outra é que o próprio mercado consiga internalizar isso e desenvolver as ferramentas e os instrumentos necessários para tal. Enquanto isso, vamos trabalhando fortemente para melhorar esse ambiente e sinalizando que o país tem caminhado a passos largos para melhorar bastante esse espaço de atuação. Nós temos hoje inúmeros processos, aí é uma das questões que aflige processos minerários que, ainda por conta de uma desconexão da nossa estrutura com a realidade que enfrentamos, nós ainda não damos as respostas mais rápidas e mais assertivas. Então, dou um exemplo e anuncio também que, depois de um ano sem termos rodadas de disponibilidade de áreas, nós chegamos ao final do ano com 77 mil áreas para disponibilidade e devemos fazer uma primeira rodada neste semestre. Ainda vai ser o edital publicado no mês de março e até outubro ou novembro deste ano fazemos uma outra rodada. Ambas terão 5 mil áreas disponíveis para a disputa do mercado. Então, esse é um passo importante e a gente gradativamente está melhorando essa atuação nossa e, com o apoio do governo, precisamos e continuamos perseguindo esse objetivo de melhorar nossa eficiência, melhorar as nossas práticas, e aí, em termos de práticas, a gente tem também a consciência de que nós, do poder público, não desenhamos as práticas. Eu costumo dizer que não gosto de soluções de gabinete. Tivemos uma experiência agora, eu e alguns diretores da agência, estivemos fazendo uma visita a uma operação de uma importante empresa brasileira que atua também aqui, Sudbury, e ficamos bastante encantados com a formatação, com o desenho da operação, com o cuidado com a questão de segurança e controle de riscos. Então, assim, é o tipo de prática que a gente tem que absorver e traduzir nas nossas resoluções para que a gente estimule essas práticas. Então, nós não temos e não precisamos ter a pretensão de que, por ser um órgão regulador, nós vamos ditar como cada empresa, cada indústria vai atuar. A indústria vai atuando, nós vamos fiscalizando, mas nós temos que absorver essas grandes e boas práticas que são e devem ser disseminadas pelo mundo como um todo. Portanto, nós temos consciência de cada passo que temos que dar, nós temos trabalhado um planejamento que hoje se concilia tanto do ponto de vista da mineração, do estímulo à mineração responsável, alinhada com as práticas de ESG, que estão postas, mas que vai além disso, vai além dessas práticas que estão colocadas. É uma mineração que a gente pretende estimular, tanto no comportamento do ponto de vista econômico-financeiro, mas que tenha, antes de tudo, um comportamento ético. E nessa questão da ética, nós temos que observar a inserção de cada empreendimento nas comunidades, e nós temos sensibilidades importantes, como temos a região amazônica, de que o Brasil detém a maior parcela, temos as questões indígenas, e aí podemos beber bastante da experiência dessa fonte que é o relacionamento que o Canadá conseguiu manter e estabelecer com os povos originários daqui, e nós temos que também copiar e melhorar essa experiência para que nós possamos fazer uma mineração cada vez mais confortável, cada vez mais responsável, cada vez mais comprometida com o crescimento e o desenvolvimento econômico e social do país. É um país que sempre se disse do futuro, mas é um país que agora tem que fazer esse futuro presente com uma tomada de decisão e ações concretas e efetivas para que o setor mineral e a sociedade possam, conjuntamente, construir um país realmente que mereça ser chamado de um grande país. Muito obrigado.
And next, we're going to have a few words from Rodrigo Cotta talking about something very special. Rodrigo, here he is. There we go. Lovely. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very proud and happy to be here representing the Ministry of Mines and Energy. The urgency of the transition to a low-carbon global economy has generated a growing surge for critical minerals essentials for the electrification of transport and the expansion of renewable energy. In this context, Brazil stands out as a fertile ground for foreign investments in strategic minerals. I am pleased now to announce the launch at this very moment of the Guide for Foreign Investors in Critical Minerals for the Energy Transition. It's born as a fundamental tool for understanding and guidance in this promising environment. The guide begins with a general overview of the characteristics of the Brazilian population and territory, going through a general perspective of our economy, where key indicators such as gross domestic product, interest and exchange rate, international reserves, and investments are addressed, while exploring the dynamics of the business environment, highlighting initiatives such as the Growth Acceleration Program and the current fiscal framework. The guide addresses the Brazilian infrastructures of highways, railways, ports, airports, internet, and energy, outlining Brazil's commitment to modernizing its networks and creating an environment conducive to strategic investments. In the guide, it stands out the government's intention to facilitate and promote foreign investment in the sector through the launch of the Clean Energy Mining for Clean Energy Program. This is the correct name. Ongoing projects are highlighted as example of the country's commitment to responsible production of critical minerals needed for the global energy transition. At this stage, the Mining Geographic Information System, SIGMINE, stands out, which consists of an online platform developed by the National Mining Agency, Brazilian National Mining Agency, which offers several functionalities for consulting and analyzing information about the mining activity in Brazil. The guide suggests using this application, as it allows you to view mining process on a map, consult information about this process, download geospatial data, generate personalized reports, and much more. SIGMINE allows you to overlay maps comparing the distribution of mineral activities in Brazilian territory with the distribution of transport infrastructure, electricity, among others. SIGMINE is a free tool open to the public, empowering citizens, companies, and government bodies to build a more sustainable future for the sector. The guide also addresses Brazilian participation. This is very important. The guide also addresses Brazilian participation in the reserves and production of critical minerals such as lithium, nickel, copper, aluminum, rare earths, graphite, cobalt, niobium, and manganese, revealing significant potential for foreign investors. The mining process in Brazil is exposed in detail. This is also very important. The mining process, the administrative mining process in Brazil is exposed in details, from the requirement for mineral research to exploration and production, providing clarity on the regulatory and operational environment. In short, the guide for foreign investors in critical minerals for the energy transition in Brazil is not just a companion of data. It's an invitation for foreign investors to explore sustainable opportunities in a sector crucial to Brazil's economic development. The proposed journey is not only profitable, but also promising to make a significant contribution to the global transition to a more sustainable economy worldwide. Embrace this opportunity, actively participate, and help shape a greener and more prosperous future in the mining sector. The guide is available exclusively in electronic format on the Ministry of Mines and Energy website and is accessible through the QR code that is already in front of you in this card. But it's enough to turn up the QR code. It's already there here. Thank you so much for your attention.
All right, thank you. Well, next up, we have a very special partner of ours at the Brazil-Canada Chamber and our keynote speaker. Obviously, Vale is the mining company, I'd like to say, in Brazil, and obviously extremely important here in Canada. Everybody that I meet in the industry either started at Inco or is still there, and it's important to the Canadian mining industry that we have this foundation because those are the people that go off and form the junior companies and the other companies that create the foundation of our industry here. So with that, I'd like to invite Olga, and let me read your bio very briefly here. Olga Kollberg has over 25 years of experience in the metals and mining industry with leadership roles in operations, finance, and mega project construction. She is currently the Chief Project Officer for Valley Base Metals. Her prior experience includes Project Director at Simandou and Rio Tinto, VP of Projects at Itafos, and various leadership roles at Alcoa. She has a Bachelor of Engineering from McGill University, an MBA from Columbia, and she is fluent in English, French, and Portuguese. And I'm going to give you a little bit of background because I had the pleasure of meeting Olga when she moved back recently from Brazil to Canada, so I'd encourage you to speak to her afterwards or at the break if you get a chance. She's a really exciting and interesting long career in the industry. So Olga, with that, I look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you for that generous welcome. You know, I actually started my career at Inco. It was the first job I had out of university, and then I'm back. So it's a very interesting industry. You know, we lots of connections there. Peter did a great job with the land acknowledgement. I think it's very important, and I just wanted to add to that we strive to be responsible stewards wherever we operate, and to respect the cultures, ceremonies, and traditions of all who call it home. So thanks for that. And I'd like to recognize, you know, the Ambassador Carlos França and the Ambassador Wanja Nobrega. And I'd also like to acknowledge the delegation from NEM. I had the pleasure of meeting them in Sudbury this week, where the temperature went from 8 degrees Celsius to -20 in a period of 4 hours. So it's quite a baptism to Canadian weather, right? But welcome. As a Canadian who has lived in Brazil for almost a decade, I'm honored to be with you today for the mining brunch at this 18th edition of the Brazil-Canada Conference. The Chamber has an important role, an important objective to foster stronger commercial ties between our great countries. As one of the cornerstone investors in the bilateral relationship, I'm encouraged to see the bilateral trade stood around 10 billion last count, as Ambassador França mentioned. This is fantastic, but I believe our countries can do more to deepen the economic investment and people-to-people ties. And I'll be highlighting some of the opportunities that can help contribute to this flourishing bilateral relationship. Today, I'm going to focus on 3 key points: the generational opportunity for both Canada and Brazil to deliver the energy transition, an update on Valley Base Metals and some of the work we've done over the last year to strengthen our business to position us for this energy transition, and being the Chief Project Officer, I can't resist, a bit about our exciting project pipeline and how we're going to be positioning ourselves as the supplier of choice for critical minerals. As we kick off this year's Prospectors and Developers Association of Canada's Mining Convention, it's worth reflecting on the moment we find ourselves in. This is actually an exciting time for our industry. Despite current headwinds, we continue to believe in the long-term nickel market fundamentals. This is driven by the rising demand for electric vehicles and the energy transition. EV sales last year were up 32% over 2022, and they're expected to increase an additional 30% this year. Global decarbonization trends will also require more copper, and let me tell you, lots of it. We expect copper demand for EVs to increase threefold from last year, creating a deficit market by 2027. And the question is, where will this supply come from? And from which companies? So let me pause here and provide a quick update on Valley Base Metals, who we are, and how we're positioned to deliver this particular demand. We are a global mining company with operations across Canada, Brazil, Indonesia, the UK, and Japan, with approximately 15,000 employees globally. That's not including contractors, and majority owned, but entirely distinct from Valley SA. Indeed, over the last 18 months, we've taken a series of strategic actions to position Valley Base Metals for this incredible future. We created a standalone company and welcome Manara Minerals and Engine No. 1 as strategic investors. Together, these actions will help us unlock the full value of the business and accelerate growth. To put it simply, our vision is a more focused, agile, and efficient company with a simpler structure and less bureaucracy, supported by a fully dedicated governance with industry expertise and more autonomy for operations. So now let me turn to our exciting project pipeline. As you may have seen, we have committed to invest between 25 and 30 billion US dollars in energy transition metal projects over the next decade. And we see tremendous potential for resource-rich countries like Brazil and Canada. Our program will triple our copper production from approximately 350,000 tons per year to around 900, and double our nickel production from about 175,000 tons per year to approximately 300,000, all by 2030. We will be looking at spending about $10 billion across each of Brazil, Canada, and Indonesia. This investment program has the potential to generate up to 25,000 jobs across our portfolio, driving growth, procurement and supplier opportunities, and of course, socio-economic benefits for the communities where we live and operate. Our exploration portfolio has some of the most prospective land holdings in the Carajás, Andean region, Canada, Indonesia, which will feed into our project portfolio. In copper, we have a formidable project pipeline. In the Carajás, which anybody in earth sciences, unless they aren't really good at what they do, will agree is one of the most geologically blessed provinces that exist. We have several advanced projects, with Bacaba and Alamau being the next to undergo construction. Meanwhile, in Indonesia, our Huhu project is one of the largest copper-gold discoveries in the last 25 years. This project could produce as much copper per annum as all of Valley Base Metals produces today, and not to mention significant gold credits. In North America, we're nearing the completion of our Voisey's Bay mine expansion, and we think there's a lot more potential there in the Voisey's Bay Basin, not to mention Sudbury and Thompson. We're also advancing a nickel sulfate project in Bécancour, Quebec, which is also dear to my heart because I actually worked in Bécancour as well, so full circle. And expect to make a formal project announcement later this year. This green battery supply chain project will deliver 25,000 tons of nickel equivalent per year of battery-grade nickel sulfate under a long-term agreement with General Motors. In Indonesia, PT Valley has one of the largest nickel resource bases and is executing and developing growth projects directly supporting up to 400,000 tons of downstream nickel production. Now, these are big numbers for sure, but we know it's not all about what we mine, but how we mine. The way we do our work and make sure we create value for local communities and the countries in which we operate is the starting point for creating a sustainable mining business. Understanding how we can play a constructive part in developing our natural resources is an essential element in defining what responsible mining looks like. As a group, we all have clear climate change targets backed by concrete action. Customers tell us they want reliable, sustainable critical mineral suppliers, and products with the right characteristics, from low carbon footprint to water use, not just any metal, in other words. And this is reflected in our conversations with the EV supply chain participants from Tesla to GM and Ford. And it plays to our unique advantages at Valley Base Metals. You may not be aware, but more than 90% of our electricity comes from clean sources. That's hydro, wind, solar, nuclear, and biomass. We've introduced around 50 battery electric vehicles at our underground mines in Canada. And we're growing our capacities in circular mining through innovative partnerships. All this puts us in an enviable position as we embark on an exciting new path for Valley Base Metals. So let me close by iterating a few points. This is truly an exciting time for our industry and for Canada and Brazil. And we think that Valley Base Metals can be a real catalyst to create value for business and society. So I'd just like to close by saying I hope we all have a safe PDAC, and we look forward to transforming the future together. Thank you.
Thanks, Olga. That was great to hear about the development that's going on at Valley, and if there's one thing I do know is they love to invest in technology and being at the absolute forefront of the curve in what's trending in mining. So it's good to hear of all the things that are going at the base metal side as well. Next up, we have our C-Level Talk Show, and maybe I'll just do brief introductions. You guys can come up and take a seat up here. First of all, our moderator is Rob Peterman. He's the Chief Commercial Officer at TSX and Global Capital Formation, TMX Group. Rob and I go way back, and for any of you on the flight to Sao Paulo, you're very likely to see him and all his time that he's put into developing the Brazil-Canada relationship. So thank you, Paul and TMX. Next, we have Wes Carlson, who's Vice President Mining Operations at Wheaton Precious Metals. Wes, I haven't seen him yet. Is he here? Okay. Then we'll move on to Mako. Mako is the President and COO at Aero Copper. Jamili Cruz, Vice Chair of our own Brazil-Canada Chamber ESG Committee and Director of Joint Ventures and Country Manager at Brazil Rio Tinto. Next up and last, we have Jones Belther, Senior Vice President of Mineral Exploration and Business Development for Nexa Resources. Jones, thank you. Rob, I'll turn it over to you. Do you have a mic okay?
See if these are working, and they are. So good morning, everyone. On behalf of the Toronto Stock Exchange and the TSX Venture Exchange, very delighted to welcome you here for PDAC 2024. Just a couple things about our markets. So TSX and TSX Venture Exchange, if you go over the last 5 years, the most mining capital raised in the world is raised on TSX and TSX Venture Exchange. And if you look at last year, we were #1 in the world for new mining listings. So very proud of our role in the mining sector. And today, here to talk about our relationship with Brazil, which we see as incredibly important. I want everyone in this room, to underline with you that Guillaume is here. We're the only exchange in the world I'm aware of that has a full-time presence in Sao Paulo. So we really believe in this relationship and have invested in building that on the ground in Brazil and here in Toronto. So that's something that we're very committed to. We know Brazil is an extraordinarily experienced mining regime and one that we're able to learn a lot from here. We also know that we intersect in an incredible number of ways, economically, capital raising wise, across the mining sector. So very interrelated between the two markets. So to kick off the panel today, and I think it's being said over and over again, but we're at a very interesting moment in the mining sector. We're seeing these themes of energy transition come together. It is a chance for the mining sector in a lot of ways to redefine itself in a world where we have car companies at PDAC and things like that. It's a very different mining sector than it was 5 to 10 years ago. So an opportunity to embrace that, and this is a chance obviously to move the sector forward. So to kick off our panel today, we have a great panel. I did a little rough calculation. I think we have over $120 billion of market capitalization up here, or soon to be up here. So a lot of very big mining companies. And just to kick things off, I'm going to ask everyone on the panel to introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about what to expect from their company in Brazil in 2024. So, Mako, why don't we start with you?
Sure, thank you. I think the market cap weighting is heavily in Rio Tinto's favor, just to be clear. Thank you for having me. I'm always delighted to be back. I think this is the 4th time participating in this event, and congratulations to the BCCC on another great year. Aero Copper, for those of you that don't know, we're a relatively new company, around for 7 years. In the last 7 years, we've raised $700 million to grow our business in Brazil, which is not insignificant for the mining sector. I know relative to the projects that Olga mentioned, it's a small amount, but currently focused on a few major projects, including the construction and commissioning of our Tucumã project in Pará, which will be starting production the second half of this year. That'll take our combined copper production year on year up 35% this year and double in 2025. So that's a main focus for us as a group. Secondly, we're also in the process of constructing the second deepest shaft in Latin America. It's 1,500 meters deep at our Caraíba operations. We're also growing a pretty significant nickel discovery in the Curaçá Valley in Bahia. We're focused on our new partnership with Vale Base Metals and the Furnas project in the Carajás, which we're very excited about this year. And also very committed to advancing across our portfolio towards sustainable mining. I think we're one of the first companies in Brazil to implement towards sustainable mining. And we should be fully compliant within the next 2 years. So that's been a huge focus of our teams.
It's working? Yes. Okay. Hi, everybody. Good morning. Bom dia. Jamile Cruz. Vocês já me conhecem de outros anos, de outras frentes que eu tenho, mas agora completando 1 ano e 2 meses com a Rio Tinto, nessa posição de líder Brasil e diretora de Joint Ventures. No nosso portfólio Brasil, uma das nossas JVs, no Brasil é principalmente JVs, é a Mineração Rio do Norte, MRN, and the other one is Alumar, Alumínio do Maranhão, que fica, that's in São Luís. And we do have a few representatives here, Angelina Meta, who leads the joint ventures with the Aluminum Group, and Jonas Mota, who I know a few of you know. He's now with us and leading not only Peru, but Brazil for RTX, which is our exploration group. It's a very interesting year for Rio Tinto. Last year, we celebrated 150 years. We're a few of the companies in the world that managed to get to that celebration of 150 years. For me and my career that I passed through Vale, worked a few years with BHP and led my own organization, it's very interesting to see the operations of a company of the size of Rio Tinto and the way they're organized. So learning process, and I relate a lot to Olga and what you're sharing. Like, I've been doing a little bit of the opposite of you. I'm a Brazilian who grew up and studied engineering in Brazil, came to work at Hatch and other companies here, and now almost doing the flow backwards, based in Montreal, but spending a whole lot of time in Brazil and understanding how mining is operating from that perspective of the international investment. So it's very cool to see the two sides, and I think Rio Tinto has this ability to develop very large projects, but I do see the growth happening a lot more towards the joint ventures. We know, and a few of the speakers already mentioned, the challenge with financing the large projects. So the perspective of actually joining forces and being able to lead and grow and figuring out how to actually put the money to develop in the new terms, right? We know that the new terms of the word in terms of accepting and enabling the developing of new projects from a license to operate perspective, from an ESG perspective, requires, if not double, a lot more investment that we've done in the past. So we're going through that transition project, and the energy transition is also demanding a whole lot. I feel like I need to connect with some of the people who are here representing the energy transition in Brazil, because we're going through that process to some of our operations. And it's a challenge, right? It's a challenge to find the tier 1 contractors to execute it. It's a challenge to connect to the grid, even though we have the greenest grid in the world and are able to produce something that's so relevant to the world we're speaking today. The demand's there, and I think the demand's also coming from clients. I represent the aluminum group, and our clients are visiting the mines. They want to ensure that the source of the bauxite, that the process to build up the alumina, the smelters are doing a very ESG focused and green way. So I think we're passing through this transition now, and we're all learning through this process. So to me, besides investment and everything that's possible to do, I think this relevance and understanding of the new world we're in, it's what's really guiding the decision making in 2024 for large organizations. And I would think that for the smaller cap ones as well, it's what's really top of mind.
Jones?
Hi, everybody. Good morning, and thanks for inviting me to participate in this panel here. I would say, talking about Nexa, we are not a recent company, okay, maybe a recent name, but we operate in Brazil for more than 60 years. So that's a quite long time. And we are basically a zinc company. We are listed in New York Stock Exchange, and we operate 3 mines in Brazil and 3 mines in Peru. We have 2 smelters in Brazil and 1 smelter in Peru that is the largest in the Americas. In terms of our priorities for this year, it's to complete the ramp up of our new mine that we recently built, and we are operating in Mato Grosso state, west of Brazil, Aripuanã. That is a polymetallic mine, more than zinc. We are going to produce zinc, copper, lead, silver, and gold as byproducts. Also, we have a project that we are integrating the 2 mines that we operate in Peru, El Porvenir and Atacocha. We are integrating those mines into one operation, a single mill and a single tailings dam, and increasing, I would say, competitiveness and reducing costs in the operations there. Also, we are doing lots of brownfield to extend the life of mine of our operations, and we also doing lots of exploration for new projects, mainly in Peru and Brazil. I would say those are the main priorities that we have for 2024.
Great. So when we connected, we talked about a few of the things that we wanted to bring out, particularly put a Brazilian lens around. One of the topics that we wanted to talk a little bit about was social license, and particularly we'll start with Jamila and what Rio Tinto's doing as a company around creating that social license, but particularly any observations in relation to Brazil, and I'll ask the other panelists to jump in at the end.
For sure. I would say I spend 80% of my time, if not more than that, in that discussion. Social license is a priority. For those who don't know MRN is operating in the Amazon. So we are in Pará State at Porto Trombetas. So you can only imagine the repercussion that happens after a COP28. And now for those related to IBRAN and other groups, we're already starting that conversation. COP30 will be in Belém. So it is going to be in the state of Pará. And we are seeing the changes that are going to need to happen based on it, right? So the questions are intense, the demand for information is intense, And our work is essentially to showcase the good things that we're already been developing with the communities and the work around reforestation and how do we actually offset the suppression of the trees and everything that we do through a mine operation. So there's so many elements to the license to operate that I think we've been developing and further understanding and really making the link to the fact that we shouldn't be just discussing mining in a room like this one. We need to open up and include the bigger society to have this discussion, right? So I think we do a very good job, or we have done good jobs at including communities and having open discussions with communities through the process of licensing, but maybe the engagement could be much better throughout the operation of a mine, and I think that's one of the areas that we're under development and really understanding how to do this better. So in this exercise, I think for the bigger Rio Tinto, that's a big effort to really learn how to listen to communities that are around our operations or within our operations and really readjust our expectations, readjust the way we do business to understand that the benefits needs to be for all sides involved. So that has been a big front. I think we, as a mining group, used to look, if you look at the reports from EY or other groups, like it would be the top risks for the mining, and it would be like license to operate top one, usually like top 1, 2, 3. And I think we've been readjusting our concepts or mindsets to look at it as an opportunity, to look at it as a priority. And I think that's what the license operate has been changing the meaning to really look at it and see what are the changes that we can do here and what are the voices that hasn't been heard yet that we need to adjust our own expectations as an operator, but also the expectations of the community so we can work together towards the results we want. So it has been, as I said before, top of the mind. It is kind of a #1 priority right now because we understand the limitations that that's going to generate to us, and the other side is the opportunities that can happen when we really work with the communities to get to where we want to get and work with them to be better operators, essentially. So that's the move that I see within also the request from investors, right? I think if you haven't received yet as a mining operator, you will receive, like we're getting more and more questions from clients, from the investors, and we're really stepping up to address that, not just from a reactive mode, but being very proactive to address and understand what needs to be done.
Folks, we have Wes Carson here as well.
Thank you very much. All right, well, just before we introduce Wes, we'll just finish this conversation on social license. So, Mako, Jones, anything you want to add, and particularly anything with a Brazilian lens?
Yeah, so I think for context, I missed it. You know, we're a Brazilian company, so we have only 30. Although we're Canadian and New York listed, we only have 30 employees of our 3,500 workforce outside of Brazil. Something that we're really proud about, entirely Brazil focused. I think for us, you know, Jean-Louis hit it on the head. I think the one thing that we think about a lot when we're making commitments to the community as an operator and trying to improve our community relations, there's no one size fits all approach, very bespoke to the regions in which we operate. I'd say the one thing that we spend a lot of time thinking about is how do we make investments or contributions that are sustainable, i.e., you know, can stand on their own 2 feet. So if you look at one of the projects that we completed recently, you know, we invested $5 million to build a hospital locally that services about 70,000 people in Bahia, a rural hospital. And the whole idea with that investment was to make sure that within a very short period of time, the hospital could stand on its own 2 feet. We finished the last phase of the expansion a few weeks ago, and January was the first month that it was cash flow break even, so it turned around very quickly, and I think that's key to developing. You know, we talk about social license to operate, but I think it's tied directly with sustainable development and making sure that because we work in a cyclical industry, that the programs and policies and investments that we make, again, can stand on their own 2 feet.
Well, I think, we work very close to the communities where we are working in Brazil, and I think our new mine, Aripuanã, is a very good example of that. well, we always look at giving jobs to the local people, and then I would say use as much as local people in the operations instead of bringing people from outside. So prior to start construction in Aripuanã of our mine, we brought a technical school to the town there that is together with the industry in Brazil, the SESI, and we constructed that, and we brought all the course, and we trained more than 800 people prior to starting the construction of the project there. On top of that, we also invested on water treatment for the town and the hospital, and we refurbished entirely the hospital and increased the size of the hospital there. Also the police station, we did a complete refurbishment there, and because we knew that we would bring lots of people there, so you need more, I would say, support to the local town and everything, and I think that worked very well with the local community, and the perception there is very positive of the mineral sector when you start, I would say, working prior to the impact that you were going to bring there. You make the community and the town prepared for receiving that to reduce the impact that you are going to generate.
I was going to mention that this fall, Canaccord hosted what was the first ever that I'm aware of a mining conference in Sao Paulo. So brought together investors from South America to talk about the mining sector. Some of my panelists from that conference are in the room, but it was an amazing conversation, and the amount of pride that each of the companies took in terms of the impact that they're having in the communities, the jobs they're creating, the economic impact, hospitals, investments, things like that. We're really seeing mining companies, doing business in places that need growth and need economic opportunity, and thought it was an incredible example of like all of those companies, incredible example of how much they embrace that the ability to impact the communities they're working on or working in. So Wes, we got started early on this panel, so thanks for joining us. We just want to give you your chance to 3 minutes, introduce yourself and a little bit about what to expect from Wheaton Precious Metals in 2024, and maybe particularly with a lens on Brazil.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Robert. So apologize for being late. So but I'm Wes Carson, so VP Operations for Wheaton Precious Metals. So I look after really all of our existing operations, which we've got now. We're at 18 operating assets and 26 development assets kind of spread around the world. So and Wheaton really is a premier precious metal investment vehicle. So really, and we partner with other kind of companies, mining companies, to help build operations all over the world. Our largest partner is Vale. So and we've been partnered with Vale since 2013, primarily on the Salobo project. So Salobo makes up almost 30% of our revenue as a company. So and it's over $1 billion a year that we bring in. So and really Salobo has been a fantastic asset for us all the way through. We've invested over $3 billion in Salobo over the years, and starting in 2013, 2015, 2016, and we put another $370 million in last year for the expansion at Salobo 3. So and really are really excited about that asset particularly and how it's growing. We also have a couple of Canadian assets with Vale in Sudbury and in Voisey's Bay as well, which are fantastic assets as well. Really overall, I mean, Wheaton is we're in kind of a growth period here. So I mean, we just put out recently our guidance 2 weeks ago, I guess now, for 2024. We're expecting to produce somewhere between 550,000 and 620,000 gold equivalent ounces this year, growing over the next 5 years up to about 800,000 ounces in 2028, and then averaging over 850,000 from 2029 to 2033. So really 40% growth in what's already a pretty impressive portfolio of assets. As I spoke about, really kind of the 18 operating, about 30% of that growth comes from those operating assets. We've got another 30% from development assets that are all permitting or in construction currently, and another 30% there that really is kind of in that more permitting stage and will come in a little bit later in that sort of 10-year plan. So lots of exciting things really over the next few years here, and I think overall we're very excited about gold and silver and really where those metals are going in the next period of time here. I think in a period of kind of global instability, usually precious metals do very well, and we've certainly seen that in the last couple of years, and excited on continuing to grow that and continuing to deploy the capital that we have and as we move forward and investing in high quality assets.
Great. So we talked about social license. Let's talk a little bit about capital and access to capital. I'm going to start with you, Meko. You've done a lot of things around raising capital. You've done an IPO. You've done debt financings. You've done streaming transactions. What do you think the sector needs to do in order to attract more capital? And we've talked already this morning about the tremendous need that so many companies have to attract capital. So maybe talk about what you think needs to happen, and we'll invite the other panelists to jump in as well.
Yeah, look, thanks for the question. It's a complicated time for the sector. I think if you look across not only the producers but also the development projects and really on the developer side, the inability to access capital. So I came back from the BMO conference last week, which is represented by most major mining companies and developers throughout the world, certainly in North America, with listings in North America. And one of the common themes there, we've been fortunate as a producing company and a mid-tier to be able to attract capital, as I mentioned, over $700 million raised through a variety of debt, precious metals, and some equity raises to grow our business. But what you're seeing now is a very obvious dislocation where we need critical metals, but there really is a lack of capital out there. And I think credit to the streaming companies for stepping up and providing a lot of the capital over the years as the equity markets have come back. But really, I think the challenge the sector has right now is to execute on projects and growth plans. If you look across the major producers and certainly the mid-tiers, some of the projects that are on the horizon to meet this growing demand in critical metals, I think really to attract the incremental investor to the sector requires really strong execution, really strong commitment to social practices and sustainability, but also getting to the point across all the portfolios where capital returns can start to be a topic of discussion. So, I think from where I stood back 7 years ago when we started Ero Copper, there was quite a bit of capital in the sector, and we were fortunate to be able to start at that time. But looking ahead, I'd say with interest rates being high and that lack of that incremental investor in the space, it's a complicated time for capital financings when the sector really needs it. So I guess the message to everybody is that we share in that responsibility to execute on projects, to make sure that we do the things that we're saying that we're going to do, not just to our local communities, but also to our shareholders. And as I said, it's a shared responsibility across the entire sector. If we all perform well, I think that the incremental investor will be there.
Any else want to jump in on this topic?
Yeah, I was going to pick up on the comment around shared responsibility. We are seeing and participating in more and more discussions with major banks, for example, who are discussing the possibility of not investing in mining anymore. And it's always a question around, really? Like, do you really understand what all this is about? I'm sometimes surprised by some of the banks that are raising the question and saying we're considering pulling our investment from mining. So as a sector, I think this is kind of the right room to discuss this. It's the same conversation we always have around society and the need to further understand mining, as we do have the challenge with some of the dam situations that we have in Brazil right now. And it's a constant discussion around safety and around our relationship with environment and the communities, that we need to always be on top of it and do our jobs, right? Show our responsibility to correct the mistakes and make sure we're doing it right. But yeah, I always wonder what is the type of project that we need to face together to raise the profile of mining, educate people on the need for the work that we do, to not have to keep stepping into the conversation of people pulling resources and pulling investments. And then I'll go back to the concept of partnerships. I think the junior mines, I sit on a board of a junior mine as well, and I understand the challenge that it is to raise capital and get to that point. So we always talk about the partnerships and partnering with the large ones. It's always one of the real solutions that's put on the table. So then representing Rio Tinto, I see the need to go and look for these potential projects. Like Rio Tinto has this profile of preferring the organic growth and going after exploration projects that are out there, but I think there's always that opportunity to look into the openness and the projects that are out there and support the financing of these projects. But to me, I think the one profile I would raise there, it's our need to combine forces to have a very clear discussion with investment bankers, with the large banks around what is mining, why they should continue to support it, because it's becoming a thing.
Jones?
Yeah, I agree 100% with what Marco said, that it's, I think if we look at ourselves as a sector, I would say that we are not performing very well in terms of project development as a whole, I would say. If you look at, we had overruns in our project in Aripuanã, and that's not news, everybody knows. But I'm not going to name other companies here, but there's many others that did the same when developing projects. And I would say that the companies that develop projects on budget and on time, I would say that are very rare nowadays. So we have really to think about this and I would say work on delivering better. And then the investors will value that more and will invest on the companies and will have funds available for other projects. That's I would say from the investor side. I think we have to reflect on that very, I would say, deeply. In terms of, I would say, environmental and all the ESG, I would say matters. I think the accidents we had in Brazil, that was really bad, and that really affects I would say, the society perception of our sector. And I think we have lots of learnings with those accidents, and Brazil is working a lot on improving, I would say, legislation. And if you look at nowadays, the requirements of Brazilian legislation, it's a lot stronger and even much more, I would say, restricted than TSM here in Canada and everything. So I think that's a very good progress. And I think companies are doing well in that regard. But in my opinion, I think we as a sector, as we tend to communicate a lot with the communities where we are in, where we operate, but we are really bad in communicating to the society as a whole. Okay, I think we should be communicating more and better to the society, and I would say showing what mining is and what mining does and what mining works in the environmental front and the social front and everything. I think we are lacking a lot in terms of communication, and there's a big opportunity there for us to improve and get closer to the society and have a much better perception. We have surveys in Brazil that's done by, I would say, by EBRAN and other institutions there, that the communities that knows mining and they are closer to the mining operations, they have a very good perception of the mining business. The communities that are far away, or the big cities and everything, that people that are not familiar to the mining operations, they have a very bad perception of mining. So So that reinforces my point. I think it's lacking communication to the society from the mining sector. That's my opinion, and that would help a lot in terms of bringing more funds to mining investments.
Wes?
Yeah, I definitely agree with the other panelists here. I mean, it is a challenge in messaging that the industry has had for a long, long time. I would say we do have an opportunity right now with this energy transition and the concept of critical minerals to really tell a different story. And I think we're starting to see that come around. And the idea is that the metals like copper and zinc and nickel are such essential parts of how this energy transition happens. That is becoming an easier message to get out there. And I think we need to continue to build on that. I think also really we have an opportunity as an industry to really push the concepts of what we do. I mean, this idea of sustainability and ESG and that is something that's been around in the mining industry for decades. We just haven't done a really good job of actually telling everybody what we do. So, and it's really an opportunity for us to go out and actually teach other industries how to do this stuff correctly, how to partner with communities, how to build that social license to operate. It's really an essential part of how I think we improve our image. So, because I mean, certainly the idea that banks are considering not investing in mining going forward. We've got universities that are having mining programs that are falling apart, and that where it is, mining is an essential part of where we go over the next decades here and do this energy transition that everybody is pushing towards here. I mean, one of the biggest challenges certainly that we've seen is really in the equity space. I mean, that's really where the problem is that has developed over the last couple of years, and whether it's a lack of trust or whether it's just a lack of appetite for risk has really become the real challenge, I think. We've certainly seen an opportunity in the streaming space to fill some of that gap there. We did 8 transactions last year, committing over $1 billion into principally development companies, and really see it as an opportunity for us to put kind of that label on a project as one that really should go forward and that we believe in going through. I do think Brazil has a very important part to play in how this transition sort of happens and how we change this messaging, and that as a country, it has a very strong history in mining and a very strong tradition and understanding of the mining industry. Lots of other countries out there that don't have that same identity that certainly I think Brazil has. And with companies like Vale that are such an essential part of kind of the national identity, it really gives you that opportunity to be a world leader in the space of telling the story of what mining can do and where we can move things as we go forward. So, I mean, overall, I think it's a tough space to be in right now, particularly from a junior perspective. I mean, trying to raise equity anywhere, I mean, and particularly the junior developer space. But I think there's a light at the end of the tunnel here if we can continue to kind of push forward with this positive kind of messaging on where mining is and where we plan on going over the next while.
So maybe we'll just talk a little bit about specific commodities for a moment, and I guess the case for investors for some of them. So why don't we start with you, Wes? We'll ask about precious metals in particular. So we have certain precious metals that are at all-time high prices. We're also in a very high inflationary moment, at least in certain economies. So what's the case right now for investors?
Well, certainly I'll start off with gold. That's kind of the main one that really is that everybody sort of focuses on here, and then maybe I'll talk a little bit about the other ones. But gold is really, I mean, any kind of analyst consensus right now is that everything on gold is looking very positive right now. I mean, gold is that store of value, has been for thousands of years. It is really part of kind of the human psyche around an anti-inflationary kind of product that you can actually invest in. I think with a lot of the challenges that we're having geopolitically in the world right now, I mean, the wars going on in Ukraine and in the Middle East, those are not showing any signs of letting up anytime soon. And the number of federal elections that are going on this year is adding to really an unprecedented kind of level of global instability, I think. And as much as you don't like to say that there's a silver lining on something like that, the gold is definitely that. It is that store of value. We're seeing really massive investments by central banks into gold that was letting off, I would say, in the last decade, in the last 2 or 3 years, particularly kind of post-COVID here, we've seen massive investment into gold. And I think we'll continue to see that. And really, as investors are looking at that kind of inflationary pressure, it is certainly, it's a very positive place to be in right now. We feel and positive in the long run. I think the $2,000 kind of limit that we've sort of hit right now, we don't seem to be dipping below that. It sort of seems to have set a new floor, and I think kind of the sky's the limit above that right now, certainly. For silver, it really, I mean, silver generally has followed gold in the past. Right now, the ratio between gold and silver is at near historical highs, getting close to that kind of 90-to-1 ratio. Silver does have a lot of other benefits in it, and I mean, particularly in the solar energy space and a lot of other industrial uses where silver is a very, very important part. So actually far more industrial investments there than gold has. But silver also has an investment value to it that I think is reasonably, it hasn't caught up to gold, and I think we'll see that over the next couple of years. You should see silver start to come up. Platinum, palladium would be the other two that we definitely have investments in, albeit quite a bit smaller than our gold and silver investments. Those ones are more interesting in that they are principally in the catalyst of internal combustion engine vehicles. And we are seeing kind of trends down slightly on that, but at the same time, there is really strong growth in that space over the next 5 to 10 years, particularly in the kind of hybrid vehicle space, which seems to be really where that push seems to be. So overall, I mean, we're very positive on precious metals really going forward here. And I mean, certainly in the next couple of years, but in the next couple of decades even, I think we'll continue to see great growth in those metals.
We hear the point about the U.S. elections, across all sectors, holding back financing transactions right now with the uncertainty associated with that. Jones, let's talk a little bit about zinc and what are the global drivers for zinc and.
Okay, let's just to talk a little bit first in terms of fundamentals for metal prices. I'm from a time when we were saying that price, if we have a war, we would have good prices for metals, and then it would be good for mining. And I can tell you we have 2 wars ongoing right now, and the metal prices are suffering. So I would say metal prices pretty much doesn't follow industry fundamentals anymore. I would say at least zinc and even copper, because I think it's much more nowadays financial driven than by the industry fundamentals. But anyway, talking about industry fundamentals, I think the energy transition, it's good for several metals and also for zinc. Zinc, the main use of zinc is galvanizing steel, so that's the largest consumption. And if we are going to put a wind turbine, you need to galvanize the steel that holds that turbine there. If it's onshore, and the offshore will need much more zinc to protect the steel there. So that's we see a good consumption of zinc in the energy transition in that sense. Also, all the frames that holds the solar panels, they are galvanized, and that's growing a lot, and you need zinc for that. And if you look at electric vehicles, the largest or the biggest amount of electric vehicles produced in the world is in China. And we know that they have to export I would say the majority of those vehicles out of China, and the galvanization for requirements for a vehicle out of China is much, I would say, stronger than what is required in China. So they will have to use more zinc to produce the electric vehicles to be sold in US or Europe or anywhere. So in that sense, we see a good opportunity for zinc along this year and in the coming years also. And I think in terms, if you're going to give a bit more of details, I think we are going to continue having a bad period for zinc up to mid-year, mid-2024, and we see that it's going to be improving in the second half of the year.
Great. So 2 more topics I want to cover with the panel, but we are going to open things up for questions. So start thinking about if there's any questions you have for the panel. But 2 more topics I do want to cover while we have this panel here. M&A, we wanted to talk a little bit about M&A and the outlook for M&A, and then just get a few thoughts from this panel in terms of what Brazil can do to attract more capital to the mining sector. So every country in the world is here in Toronto right now asking themselves that question. So we'll get some thoughts on that from our panelists. But I'm going to, start M&A. That's, one way that companies can grow, attract more capital, create scale. Maybe we'll start with you, Mako, on that, and then invite our other panelists to jump in. But outlook on M&A and what you'd expect in 2024 and beyond.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think historically there was a lot of M&A activity in the mining sector across all size companies. So from the largest companies on downward to the mid tiers and the developers as well. I think increasingly the trend has been on. You certainly saw this last year in the gold space. You're seeing it currently in base metals, which is around joint ventures and partnerships. I think there's a few reasons that are driving that trend. Obviously, the cost of capital with interest rates being at near all-time highs, I think makes it very difficult to go acquire another company or at least take on debt. If you think about the average producing company, they're going to have some debt already in place that probably looking to refinance in the next few years at significantly higher interest rates. So for 2 companies to go merge and add more debt that needs to be refinanced in the near future, unless you get clarity around the path of interest rates, I think large M&A transactions, although they're still being discussed, probably slow down a bit in this environment, and I think you've seen that. So where there's more activity happening in the space, and I think you saw this last year again in gold and seeing it more in base metals, is around partnerships and joint ventures as a way to create value for both companies. We were fortunate enough to partner with Vale Base Metals on an asset again that we're very excited about, and I know that there's been more activity and more discussions around partnering on assets. Again, not just given the cost of capital, but also the risk to project execution, and quite honestly, the constrained capacity that the sector faces in bringing on multiple projects at once. So, we're a relatively mid-sized company. I'd say that our project pipeline is candidly as much as we can handle and be comfortable with to execute in a way that is risk adjusted and we think is going to deliver value. So, for me, I think the future on M&A, again, unless we get clarity on the path of interest rates, and maybe that comes through election in the U.S., but certainly I think that there's more of a drive to partnering, aligning values, creating synergies through joint ventures and strategic partnerships than there is on pure mergers and acquisitions in the historical sense of the word.
Yeah, I would say I'm 100% with Marco on that. It's been, I think 2023 has been a year of joint ventures and partnerships. For the aluminum front that I represent, we definitely increased our stake on our mine in Brazil, and we've saw changes or partnerships with Codelco in Chile, for example. We've seen transitions of the big fronts or the big companies moving from one JV to another. It is a way of growing without maybe taking the level of risk that a greenfield would take. So I think we're going to see more and more of that. Like on the transition for the energetic transition as well, we saw the development of new technology being through the front of partnerships too. So I think it is a way, and it's an efficient way. Like, I don't know, I work for a JV, so I like the governance, I like the challenge, I like the way that you work with partnerships, understanding what each one of these large corporations bring the best to the table and are able to grow together. So definitely it's one of the ways that it's less of the M&A traditional that we see, but more of like, how can we make this happen together?
Well, I agree with the others here, and I think it's a low cycle for M&A. This lack of funding in the market, it affects that also, and I believe that it's I would say we are right in the buyer's cycle. I would say everybody's undervalued. And if there's a company with lots of money, I think there is opportunities everywhere. But there again, difficult to see. I would say management recommending any M&A right now because the companies are undervalued. And I think partnerships is something that's going to be happening more frequently from now on. And let's wait for a more brilliant cycle in the coming years.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing kind of that partnership model kind of is the one that seems to be moving forward a lot. I mean, traditional M&A it's not the space for it right now, and there do seem to be a few opportunities out there if they're kind of straight paper transactions. But I definitely agree with Maka that really anybody who's having to take on more debt to do a transaction right now, it's just not going to happen. I think that's a large part of the reason why we're seeing a lot of the opportunities that we are right now, because really, I mean, that's what kind of streaming is that partnership, and it's allowed us to kind of display the model that we've got in a very real way to kind of add that more credibility to some of these development companies and show that they can actually fund these projects in a very difficult space right now. So I think that opportunity will continue on through 2024. I don't think you'll see a lot of recovery in that equity space until we start seeing M&A activity again. I think that's really what it's going to take is that once you start seeing M&A activity, you start seeing the crystallization of that value in some of these smaller companies. That's what will bring investors back into that equity space. But it's a bit of a chicken and egg kind of that we're in right now here, is who's going to kind of go first. So yeah. But overall, I think that the concept of partnerships, though, is a very positive thing to see grow in the space, and I hope we continue to see that.
Great. So moving on to maybe last kind of formal topic here. PDAC's an opportunity for everyone to look in the mirror, think a little bit about, how do you get that balance right between the economic opportunities for the mining sector and then balancing off the social and other factors that we need to have in order for the mining sector to grow. But maybe ask each of their panelists for their view on what can Brazil do as a jurisdiction to attract more capital and help to move the mining sector forward. So I don't know who wants to go first, but
sure, I'll do it. I think the first thing that comes to mind, unfortunately, there is still the perception of the challenges that it is to operate in Brazil. I know that's not the reality for lots of the Canadian operations, because Canada has been present in Brazil as an investor in mining for so long, but maybe for the more international corporations where the headquarters are not Canadian, there is still a challenge to understand Brazil as a safe and reputable jurisdiction. So I think the tax reform is potentially like a game changer for just simplification and easiness of understanding how to do business in Brazil. We have an event with BCCC that we call it Doing Business with Brazil for a reason, right? There is the challenge to understand how to do business in Brazil that we need to overcome. The other thing, it's ESG practices. We do have the Amazon. I know we share it with a few other countries, but when people think Amazon, they think Brazil. And I do think we need to create better awareness that the Amazon, yes, it's a beautiful forest and it's an ecosystem we need to protect, but it's also 30 million people living in that zone that we need to understand how to create the economic outcomes that we need to sustain. So I would, in my head, those are the key things, like simplification and really being able to explain Brazil as a place to do business beyond Canada, and also explaining and showcasing the beautiful ESG practices in the places that we have. Of course, we have to continue to have the big discussion around safety, around dam protection and all of that, but there is good practice that I would love to showcase even more outside of Brazil.
Yeah, I echoing that, I think from my perspective, and having had the opportunity to speak with a lot of investors, even over the last week, I'd say that Brazil is certainly in a bright moment right now from the international investment community, particularly given recent events elsewhere in South America. There's a lot of positive momentum for Brazil. I'd say that from a development perspective and accelerating some of these projects is probably the best way to showcase what Brazil's capable. If you look at, not only what Aerocopper is doing in Brazil, but also G Mining and Bravo and a few other Canadian listed companies that are developing projects quite successfully in Brazil. I think, like I said, the incremental investor, incremental source of capital, I think, is waiting on the sidelines to see how some of the geopolitical climate evolves. But as I said, from my perspective, and certainly meeting with a lot of our own institutional investors, I think that Brazil has a real opportunity to attract a huge amount of capital. I think the event that was hosted in Sao Paulo was outstanding, that Canaccord hosted. I know there was quite a few of you were there, and to really showcase, again, not only to international investors, but also Brazilian investors. I think anyone who's been to JK Itaimi Mall in Sao Paulo knows that there is a lot of capital in Brazil, and I think to start seeing some interest from not only international investors, but also Brazilian investors in the mining space is something that I'm personally excited to see develop, and I'd like to think that we can continue to foster those relationships and get some of the some investors in Brazil interested in not only Brazilian companies, but also the international mining community. So,
Great.
Yeah, and if I can just add one little thing, the workforce. I know you had a question there that we might not be getting into it, but the Brazilian mining workforce, it's one that's strong, heavily qualified. You can look around this room. It is a challenge that we have in Canada, and we'll have even more with the retirement years that are coming for a big, large population of mining workers in Canada. And in Brazil, we don't have that issue, right? We do still access a very high caliber of workforce in mining, which is amazing, and people need to know that so they know that they can develop very strong business in Brazil.
Agreed. Just to echo that, I think, as I said, we have 3,500 employees at Aerocopper. Our project that we're building now at Tucumã, it's 100% Brazilian engineering, Brazilian contractors, and a Brazilian owners team. And it's something that we're really proud of. And I think the quality of that project, being able to, fight every day to keep costs in control and keep the project on task, I think is a huge credit to the quality of the mining sector really in Brazil. So
we have a strong participation of women. So women in mining Brazil, it's going strong, growing every day, and you can see it. You can see it in this room. You can see on the events that you participate in Brazil. So also kudos to the women who are leading the movement, Patricia and all, because it's making a difference, and we should recognize that.
Great. Wes Jones, you.
Well, in my opinion, I think what's the negative part of Brazil? Starting from that, I would say bureaucracy. We are a Latin country, and as a Latin country, we have bureaucracy. I think Brazil has to work on reducing that. I think the fiscal regime reform there is going to go in a good way, and I think that's improve attractiveness of Brazil for investors. I think that's needed, and it's very important. I think. Also, Brazil has to reinforce the mining national agency there. I think it's very important to have a strong agency there and put more qualified people there, because I do agree with them that they have very few people if compare them to other government institutions there. And but in a sense, I would say, as a general in Brazil, I would say we have qualified people for mining and for any other industry that we have in the country there. We have a strong agricultural business there, and Brazil has a very entrepreneurial society. I would say they see mining, communities and city, local towns, they see mining as business and as development and generation of good and qualified jobs. So Brazil is a pro-mining country, despite all the accidents we had, that those were bad. I'm not, I would say, trying to avoid to say that, but I think we have lots of learnings out of that. And even with those, Brazil has still a society that is pro of mining, and Brazil has to market that better and to attract investors. We have potential. We have a good country to work on, and have a very skilled people all over the country.
Yeah, I think just to echo what the others have said here, I mean, certainly a clean regulatory space that's got a clear path to moving a project forward is essential. I mean, the bureaucracy is certainly challenging in any of those, but I think Brazil has the opportunity really to come out as a leader in this space. I mean, despite some of the challenges over the last few years, I think the country has come out stronger from that with a very strong regulatory process that can be echoed around. As I said earlier, I mean, really, I think continuing to focus on that kind of mining tradition and kind of the culture that's there, and really building on the fact that you do have an amazing workforce in the country. I mean, we certainly see that very strongly at Salobo and across Valais. I mean, the expertise and talent that's there in the country is something that can be exported around the world and should be, and I think that will really help to grow the profile of Brazil as a minely friendly jurisdiction and just continue to focus on that space.
Great. So I don't think Alejandro from Canaccord's here today, but I know from our side, Guillaume and Carolina, who are both here, when we sort of became aware of that opportunity, really, both of them really got behind that event, and our experience participating there was predominantly Brazilian investors that were meeting with the mining companies, and we think there's an even bigger opportunity to bring more investors from across South America in to participate in that type of event, both how Canaccord will continue to advance that event, and we'll obviously be big supporters of that, but also other Canadian banks looking at being more active in the region, right? Because the more investors we can bring to the mining sector, as we've discussed here today, the better for everyone. And we've seen across our issuers in Brazil some really great performance stories, right? Like we've talked about how the mining sector needs to perform, but we've also had some really great success stories that have created value for investors in Brazil. So, we think there's something great here and something we can all continue to build on. But before I give our panelists a shot at final comments or takeaways for the room, I just wanted to ask if there are any questions. Daniel?
Wes, I'm going to ask you a question if you don't mind. Not to be on the spot, but one of your competitors recently renegotiated a streaming deal. The way it was restructured is beyond me. It was pretty complicated, I think. But my understanding is that it was a result of general rising cost environment. I'm wondering if, when you're going to look at new projects, new investments, are you seeing that as you're negotiating and looking into your new streaming deals? I mean, we've heard on the flip side that the markets are closed and people are looking to stream, so it's presumably it's trying to find a balance between the two. I'm wondering if you can comment on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, yeah, I'm well aware of the one you're talking about there for sure. So, but it is part of, I guess, the advantages of a stream really is that you can restructure it. So it's not rigid in the same way as a royalty or debt or really even equity in that way. And it's something that we've prided ourselves on doing. As an asset changes throughout its life, you have the ability to actually go in and modify that stream to fit in a way that actually makes sense for that asset. And we've done it on any number of assets throughout our portfolio over the years. I mean, Salobo is a great example of that. I mean, really, when we did that initial deal on the third tranche, we knew there was going to be an expansion into Salobo 3. We just didn't know what it was going to look like at the time. So as that became crystallized, we actually modified the agreement quite significantly to fit better what Vale was actually doing with that asset. So I think really, I mean, it is a, hopefully we can portray it a little better than our competitor did when we're explaining how those changes are made, although there's intricacies in all of these things as you go through, and but really it is I think a major strength of the streaming model to be able to adapt as you move forward in a mine's life.
We have another question here from Mike Kennedy at CIBC. Just one thing, he is actually writing a column for our next newsletter, so watch for that. Mike?
Oh, great, thanks so much, Peter. Just a question I have is, the challenges of raising capital in this in the current market, and versus the competition for investors to actually go out and buy the commodity versus buying the underlying companies. Investors get easy. Markets have been pretty sophisticated in creating products that can get direct access to commodities. So I'd just like to get your comments on that. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. So I'd say, I mean, that again is a large part of why kind of I think the streaming model has grown so much in the last number of years. Is it does give investors a different access to capital to the commodities in a way that really I think shows significant growth. We've done a number of analysis within Wheaton around looking at what would happen if you just bought the underlying commodities, so gold or silver, any of those, versus what you actually get with Wheaton, and it is a significant difference in what that uptick is. It's somewhere on gold. I think if you look at the 20-year history of our company, if you'd invested in each one of the assets that we're in, something like 4% growth you would have seen on the gold overall through that period, and we're closer to kind of 17-18% over that period. So it really is that I think looking at what are the different ways that we can bring capital into the industry, so and really diversify things as you go through. I mean, as I said, I think equity is the real challenge right now. How do we get people excited about buying back into equity? Because it still is an important part of ways to invest in the industry. So, but I think that the streaming model has provided a real case for how to do things a little bit differently and how to allow other ways to bring investors into the business.
I agree with all that. I think that the one thing I would say about investing in, and we have this discussion with many of our investors on investing in the commodity, we're a copper producer, so a bit more difficult than I would say gold, unless you have a giant warehouse somewhere at a port you could ship copper to. But what we find talking to investors, in the mining industry, we're in a constant state of depletion. So it creates this very active dynamic around looking at partnerships, trying to grow your business, looking at M&A transactions. That doesn't exist for investors in the underlying commodity, where you're just taking a view on prices. So I think the activity in the market is what drives people largely to invest in the underlying equities. Again, I think we're in this bizarre spot at the moment where there's a real lack of capital, particularly on the equity side. But I think, as Wes alluded to, seeing some partnerships, seeing some M&A, I think that the incremental investor will follow.
I don't know if anyone else wants to comment on that. I was just going to say one of the things that we try to do as an exchange is develop different index products that include issuers. So obviously the idea of passive investing and having a bit more diversification in your portfolio can be a positive thing. So last year, for example, we worked with S&P and BlackRock and created the S&P TSX Energy Transition Materials Index. So again, that's something that allows investors to participate in a broader spectrum of companies that are in the energy transition space. So I think that company that flows through to the issuers again and creates sort of passive investors for them and allows them to focus on performing. So that's another thing that we kind of look at or think about as a building block for the mining sector. I think what we'll do, one more question? Okay, two more questions.
So this is Daniela Leite, who is head of internationalization for the CCBC. Hello, good morning. First of all, thank you for this great event. It's great to be here again. Talking about M&A, joint ventures, technology, as you had mentioned that you grow together in this partnership. Talking about AI, how do you see it in the daily process and how the companies can see opportunities to work together with this important sector, now also related to this regulatory process that is happening in Brazil as well? How do you see this for the companies for the future opportunities?
Maybe this is a conversation I have with our board almost every quarter. So on artificial intelligence, because there's been a lot of discussions about artificial intelligence and how that's going to apply to mining. I think I probably have a different perspective than probably Jamie Lee and some of the other panelists, given the size of our company. But where I do see a lot of focus. I think it's a huge opportunity for the sector on developing or whether you call it artificial intelligence or machine learning or really data science. I think there's a gray area between those three things. But where I see the current state of the market right now is that it's largely that effort is largely concentrated in the majors, partly because it's fairly cost prohibitive. So for us as a smaller company to go out and invest in new technologies, take that risk, make those big investments, it doesn't really make sense for us right now. But what I am hopeful, like all sources of technology, is that those industries, those consultants will get commoditized, and the cost of putting in machine learning or artificial intelligence will become much cheaper. You're already seeing that in the sensing technology. So one of the backbones of any sort of data science program is the amount of data that's collected. And whether it's the cost of computing or whether the cost of collecting that data, it's come down, it's 1/100th of what it cost even 5 or 7 years ago. So for us, as we look ahead on the horizon, the conversation that I have with our management teams and our operational teams is we probably need to wait a few years for the cost of the implementation to come down. But I think it'll be there in the next few years, and I think it's a huge opportunity for the whole sector to improve performance, improve safety, reduce exposure, get operators away from the work phase through autonomous mining. Those are all things that we think about, but as I said, I think there's another wave to go, which is getting that from largely a major company initiative down to the rest of the sector.
Yeah, I would stay on that. Like I think we're advancing, probably slower than we would like. I think there's a lot of changes coming, but I think in the past 5-10 years, like I used to do digital transformations for mine organizations and looking a lot of how to implement those AI or all the technology opportunities into a mining operation. And of course, we face the limitations of some of these operations that are 40 years old, and not only the availability of technology, but also like the cost of implementation of transitioning old equipment into new, right? So it's a lot easier to think about it when you're thinking on a green field or something that's like easier to brand new to implement. But there's definitely a lot of transitions happening. I remember being in a phase where we want all the data, and now we're sorting through of like what actually carrying all that data means to actually do the improvements you want in operation and sort through to say this is the data points that we actually need to improve. Definitely big strides on the safety portion. So that is definitely one of the areas that I can see clearly how we clearly use the opportunities out there to improve, but long ways to go. I don't think we're quite there on the right level of partnership yet, but I think there's a lot of investment going in. So hopefully in the next 5 years, we're going to see that change.
I think one of the big things, one of the big things that we're seeing, I mean, similar to Mako, I mean, our board has requested innumerable times that everything on AI. So I actually just did a presentation at our strategy session recently looking at AI kind of across the industry and what it could actually mean as we go forward. One of the things that I found really encouraging in looking at that is the impact that generative AI can have on the industry and what really that allows now for kind of trying smaller solutions, so not these massive digital transformations. You can actually go in and look at these large language models or even distinct models and applying simple tools like kind of the GPT-4 concept there and really just taking that and layering it on top and answering these kind of simpler kind of solutions. So things like, I mean, how to better streamline things like regulatory processes, looking at contracts, looking at really how do you streamline supply chain. I mean, there's a lot of different simpler kind of problems that I think we can streamline with AI now, that those tools are becoming much, much more accessible than they've been in the past. Over the last, the AI's been in the mining industry for 40 plus years. It's not a new thing. So, but I think it is becoming more accessible really with the advent of much, much cheaper processing power and much cheaper storage. So those two things, and getting all of your data into the cloud, and that ability to spin up processors easily and look at these concepts and look at really kind of distinct problems you run through, getting that data into a place where you can really manage it. And that's where we've seen that change in the last kind of even 12 to 18 months. There's been massive leaps forward in how that works.
But I do think we also started the transition from the whole concept of separating IT and OT, right? So we used to have like IT focus on what you're saying, procurement and all those kind of service areas versus actual operations. So once we became more aware and put like chief technology officers versus I'm expecting the IT person to fix operations, I think we're getting smarter about that, and that's where we're seeing the transition to. So
absolutely. And I agree. I think on the safety side and the environmental side are the two areas that I think have massive opportunity. We've seen it throughout all of the operations. I visit between 12 and 15 mining operations every year across the world. And really the opportunities, I think, on the safety side are really, really exciting, just in personnel tracking, equipment tracking, all of that. And then also on the environmental side of really, there's a real opportunity in all the sensors that are out there. Making some of that data more accessible to the public now is also becoming a trend that I think is very positive. And then showing kind of that analysis on all of this information that's going out there in a much more usable way, I think is really there. There's lots of exciting changes on that.
Yeah, I think there's. I think the mining sector is conservative, so it's always going to look at costs first, and then see the benefits of artificial intelligence. And but I think there's a good trend there. I think, for instance, machine learning is something that it's been widely used already in the mining, I would say, sector, mainly in exploration. Ourselves, we use that a lot. And lots of automation or autonomous vehicles that use lots of not exactly artificial intelligence, but data lake and data science and everything, and that's being used also in I would say plant or mill operation. We are using a lot of that also, and that's a trend. I think that's going to be used for sure in the near future, but costs has to be more. I do agree with the others here. Cost has to be more accessible, I would say.
Yeah, I think it's all relative, right, for the size of the company, obviously. But I would also add that, where we do see, again, smaller implementations, we are using those. We talk about that a lot with our operational team. But again, sort of when you get to the next level, what does it take to unlock the full potential of machine learning? I'd like to just add that IT projects historically have the worst track record of being on cost and on budget of all things. So I think that, again, until those prices come down or it gets commoditized a little bit, it'll be a slower uptake. But thank you for the question. I think it's very topical amongst all the boardrooms, all the operational teams.
We now have the last questions from Greg McNabb at Denton's, a great friend of the chamber. Greg?
Thanks, Peter. Rob, it's more of a question for you, because you've mentioned now a couple of times the Canaccord event earlier, I was lucky enough a couple of weeks ago to meet with Guillaume and Alejandro down in Rio and talk about the event. But when you were talking a minute ago about you see actual Brazilian demand in the markets there for investments in our company. So assuming we could get that money from Brazilian investors into these projects that are companies that are listed here, we've got a slightly different profile here, because in Brazil, the equity markets didn't get distracted by the cannabis sector and then the crypto sector and that kind of stuff. But assuming if we could get that Brazilian investor access to our markets, do you see the same pause on equity investments that we've been talking about now here on the Canadian markets? Do you think the appetite would be the same in Brazil, or is there more enthusiasm for Brazilian investors to get into mining in our markets here?
Yeah, I think, So if you think about both investor bases, right? Like, we would say that the Canadian investor base has changed quite a bit around the mining sector over the last 10 years, last 20 years, even last 5 years. It's a very, very different investor base here in Canada now than it was a few years ago. So we, as an exchange, are definitely thinking more globally about access to capital. So the companies that are coming to TSX and TSX Venture Exchange, they're coming from all over the world. And, whether it's, Dean or Guillaume or I, like, starting to think more just about, it's accessing more and more global capital. And I think, any of the panelists can jump in here, but, we've seen, a number of the Brazilian projects get, substantial interest from Brazilian investors, and as our markets get closer and closer together, and there's more Brazilian investment banks, more Brazilian institutions participating in the mining sector, the more sector, more countries we can build that are buying and investing in mining companies, and we think, Brazil can be one of those countries. And like I said, we were talking a lot about the Canaccord event, but what we saw there, in terms of the meetings, was predominantly Brazilian investors. I think there's an opportunity in Brazil, and I think, we recognize the Canadian investor base has shifted, and, this platform of TSX and TSX Venture Exchange, mining companies are going to increasingly be raising capital from international investors.
I think that's right. I think if I could just add, I've had the opportunity we market in Sao Paulo and Rio twice a year, and I've had the opportunity to sit down with a lot of different Brazilian investors. Also, we've brought a few over to visit our operations as well, some of the larger investors. I'd say two things are probably relevant for everyone in this room, particularly the TSX folks here, is that there does seem to be a pretty strong liquidity threshold, which I think is going to preclude many of at least the larger institutional funds from investing at this stage in TSX venture funds because of the size requirements that they have in terms of liquidity. So I think that although there was a huge amount of interest, I think we're a little ways off from being a big inflow of capital from Brazilian institutions into the Canadian mining sector, particularly when you're looking at smaller market cap companies with lower liquidity, lower volumes. The second thing that we've seen as a dual listed company, so in 2021, we listed on the New York Stock Exchange, and we've seen through our marketing in Brazil that much of the buying volume coming from Brazil appears to be bought off our New York listing. So today, back in 2021, 100% of our daily volume was traded on the TSX. Today, it's about 60% traded in the New York Stock Exchange. I think a large part of that is the investment coming out of Brazil. So I think the TSX has a hurdle in some respects to getting buying. I guess the question is, how do you get buying to go from the New York Stock Exchange to the Toronto Stock Exchange? I think that's a question that I'll leave with you guys to think about before next PDAC, I guess.
Great. Well, I want to thank everyone for their time. I want to thank Daniel and the BCCC for bringing us all together to have this conversation. I want to thank each of the panelists for their contributions. We started a little bit early. We've gone a little bit late. We got permission to do that. But if everyone can give the panelists a hand, thank you very much.
Okay, so we're going to get started. So I'm going to call Rafael Benke, who I think pretty much everybody in the room knows who he is. He's chair of our ESG committee of the Brazil-Canada Chamber of Commerce and CEO of Proactiva. So Rafael, over to you to give a brief overview.
Thank you very much, Dan. Good afternoon, everyone. No lunch, but good afternoon.
Don't try me.
Very good. So, bonjour, bom dia, boa tarde. Vamos falar pouquinho de ESG. So today we couldn't miss the opportunity to speak a bit about the ESG Outlook for 2024. As sort of first news to bring to you while the presentation is put on screen is that we had the privilege of having a merger of two very powerful committees in the BCCC. The D&I committee and the ESG committee are now together under a sustainability committee, sustainability and ESG. We kept the ESG acronym purposefully to highlight the relevance of this subset of sustainability that is very focused on risk management, on standards performance, particularly for capital markets, for investors, for financing, for clients, and this is what we're going to talk about today. I think 2023 was a year of a bit of a question mark around ESG. I received a few questions if that was the end of ESG, the end of the fuss of ESG, and I think what we're going to bring to the screen is very connected to it. I think, let me see if I can handle this. I just press green, Peter? Green, okay. So I think this is to start with. I think ESG started, or the ramp up of ESG started in the middle of COVID or just before COVID, right? And it was maybe disguised or also had a bit of a competition of all the issues around COVID. And then suddenly after COVID, the concerns with recession. And then when people woke up to what was happening in ESG, there was this big tsunami of climate change, all my climate reporting needs and all the inspections going on in my operations to understand what was going on. And then suddenly when I start grasping a bit better what are my climate responsibilities, operationally speaking, strategically speaking, there's a new wave coming around biodiversity and human rights and other matters. So I think a critical point regarding ESG and the questions mark of last year, if ESG is persisting or not, is that we have to be very careful where vis-a-vis these waves we are standing, right? If you're standing on the strand and watching the waves coming, is very likely that your company will drown or you will be stranded, literally. So I think it's very important that we understand the waves that are coming, and this is what the Outlook also serves the purpose, so that we can be more proactive and maybe ride these waves instead of drown because of them. So I think if we see the background of what's going on, this is the traditional global risk rank by the World Economic Forum. This has been like this for almost a decade. I think executives, key stakeholders looking 10 years ahead, seeing climate-related matters, environmental-related matters as the key global risks. So being the key global risks, we can expect response to these global risks in a variety of matters, excuse me, including regulation, including how my client will behave, including how people in general will behave, consumers, public opinion. So this is what is going to happen in 10 years from now. Right now, we are living this confusion. We spoke about elections, about polarization, about different ideologies, but we still see climate front and center, spearheading the ESG agenda, and also other social-related aspects we're going to talk about. I think also regarding the fundamentals of what is behind ESG and sustainability, this remains the same. I think countries around the world are committed to net zero economies. They are building their plans, their industrial plans, their development plans around that. The transition to the new economy is happening. Money is flowing towards that. Investments are being reviewed because of that. New funds are being created because of that, and we have BNDES here. So this is a fact that has not changed. And we know the implications of that for the mineral sector. So we are at PDAC. We know that this is from the International Energy Agency, mining as part of a new supply chain, the supply chain called energy security, called energy transition. And in that sense, how much total mineral demand will double or quadruple within the next 15 years. So, and this is to speak of minerals in general. We have some specific minerals who will increase, demand will increase by 10, 20-fold. So it's, this continues to be the same. And what also continues to be the same is that the kind of products that the market will demand and that the market will finance is not about the what, but about the how. So you can have a very good product, but if it is produced in a harmful way to the environment, in a harmful way to human rights, to the social component, it is not going to prosper. So we are at this new age where there is a criticality around not only the what, but about the how. And this is very connected to international standards, performance, ratings, as we see in the middle of the screen. A capital one that was developed last year in Brazil is the kickoff of Towards Sustainable Mining in Brazil with IBRAM and the Mining Association of Canada. We have for the current year a lot of work around convergence of towards sustainable mining with copper mark, with nickel mark, with the principles of the ICMM. So this continues and will continue to be a fact. And in this how, we have different layers and complexity coming to it. So, and this is, you know, again, being in a position of the strand and seeing the waves coming, how to be proactive and understand further what this is being, what is really at stake. Just as an example, we bring the business and human rights agenda and the business and human rights due diligence requirement, and how much this means today much beyond the workers' conditions perspective. So we see some examples of other themes that are related, that are salient to this kind of due diligence, including last year's direct connection of climate change and human rights. So how do I see the impacts of climate change, not only my assets and what and how my company is going to be affected, but also more broadly how the social fabric around my projects is being affected and what I'm doing about it. So who is watching this how, right? We see regulation developing. We're going to talk a little more about that. A lot of these voluntary measures that we've seen being developed in the last 2 decades are becoming law, so it's are becoming compliance. At the same time, these voluntary measures are progressing, so some of them are being incorporated into regulation, but the voluntary measures develop further, raising the bar. So we will have the incorporation of beyond compliance into compliance, but new developments in the beyond compliance world for the ESG. Vis-a-vis investors, sustainable companies are more attractive to investors. We're going to hear more about this throughout the events. If we go from investors square to finance, we're seeing increasingly, and that was, we had a spike last year of how much financing, and even commercial banks, we're not talking about development banks, but commercial banks having very specific subset of ESG requirements, business and human rights requirements as a precondition for financing, right? Furthermore, the supply chain being the new frontier of challenge for companies. Major companies having to onboard and embark their suppliers into their ESG practices, and with that, a domino effect also for smaller players. And of course, market access, we are seeing a lot of regulations around the world, most notably EU, as we'll see, requiring the fulfillment of conditions, ESG conditions, to enter the market. Needless to say that the scrutiny of civil society, reputationally speaking, with the bar at the same level. This is an interesting map showing the development of ESG-related policies around the world. Whatever you've seen in darker blue is over 30 policies being developed. We see a lot of major G7, G20 countries in this condition. A bit lighter blue is over 20 policies, right? So we see that major countries in the world, the key countries in the world, are spearheading a new set of policies and regulations. And these regulations affecting not only their own jurisdictions for the companies who operate in these jurisdictions, but also supply chains across the board. So with that, a domino effect that makes this a global phenomenon. So we see here, year by year, how much this is developing. This is a snapshot or a perspective of EU developments. EU is really front and center in the development, pioneering the development of these regulations. We saw last year something very important impacting Brazil, impacting Canada also, which was the EU anti-deforesting regulation with very specific requirements on human rights and specifically deforesting. We, as a highlight also, two little slides on this, the entry into force of the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, which is impacting roughly more than 50,000 companies in the EU, but with the supply chain phenomenon impacting over 10,000 companies. And this is what we used to discuss a lot in the beyond compliance world of double materiality and how I would report a specific set of ESG related factors and data now becoming mandatory in the EU. So I think this is something that will be interesting to watch, because this will have probably a benchmarking effect in other jurisdictions. We have the imminent enactment of the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive that will mandate all European countries to have corporate social responsibility controls over their supply chains, looking at the environmental aspects and particularly of the human rights due diligence in that broad spectrum that we spoke earlier. So this will affect own operations in Europe, but will affect subsidiaries and will affect value chains. And I couldn't avoid to speaking about the Modern Slavery Act here in Canada. I think the idea of fighting against forced labor, child labor in supply chains is a global phenomenon. Canada enacted specific regulation on this. It is in force, and there is a deadline this year, speaking of an outlook. If you have business with Canada, connected to Canada, you should see if you're subject to this regulation. And this is very interesting because with regulation comes liability. We're talking about $250,000 fines for directors, board members, if this is not filed. Coming to an end, in terms of ESG parameters, we're seeing a phenomenon of consolidation. So we saw TSM, Coppermark, nickel mark and ICMM coming together, maybe also gold coming together for harmonization. This was a major consolidation that happened last year with SASB and others, just to show that there is more coherence around these over 600 ESG references. Some are becoming front and center for the referencing of companies. And I think an important aspect to think is that, and the waves coming and how much we need to be proactive in the understanding of these waves, is that carbon is the tip of the iceberg. So when we are speaking about ESG, we're not only speaking about carbon. Carbon is a little segment of that. We should keep that in mind. We have to talk about this year of 2024. More than half of the planet is going to federal national elections in the world. A lot of the G20 countries, 2 billion people are going to the ballots this year. And a lot of what will happen in these elections will determine how the future of sustainability will take place in the verge of G30 in Brazil next year and so on. In prior elections, we also received the question of what do we do if the elections guide into this way or that way? And our answer has been always don't sit on the strand and watch the waves. So be proactive no matter who is in power and where this bar will be set. Continue your good work of building sustainability in your company and reducing your ESG risk. This is my last slide. And about the first question I asked, what about ESG? Is the end of the ESG? Probably 2000, well, we went through the fuss of ESG in the first 2-3 years, 2018, 19 to 2020. And you all know this graph for different reasons. The peak of inflated expectation is over. I think a lot of the crossfire around ESG that happened last year, the year before, I think is also finding an equilibrium and people understanding what is the bottom line of ESG in terms of risk management, in terms of impact pursuit. So what we are probably, where we are probably at right now is the slope of enlightenment, where people are finding out what this is about. And we will reach a plateau of productivity, meaning maybe a direction towards more substantive, robust work for sustainability. These are the key highlights for 2024. Let's see what will be the effects of this new ESG reporting with double materiality. Regulatory developments is not only about the new regulation and what is compliance, but also a new dimension of ESG, which is liability. And I'm sure Dr. Daniela Quimis will address that in our session on Tuesday. The effects of 2024 elections, as we said earlier, the future of sustainability, but keep up the good work. Supply chain due diligence, onboarding suppliers, and how much this will generate the domino effect to everyone. Biodiversity, natural capital, really coming with climate change as a twin sister right now. TNFD as a quick development after TCFD. And human rights due diligence, the centerpiece for the S of the ESG. An invitation. On Tuesday, we have our panel, The Unavoidable 2024 ESG Agenda. We'll be with Mark Travers, CEO of Brazilian Nickel, with Pedro Dias from BNDES, and speaking about ESG and their 1 billion fund. Pierre Graton, Mining Association of Canada. Julio Neri with IBRAM will also be with you, and Dr. Daniela Quimis. So thank you very much, and see you all on Tuesday.
Thanks so much. Thank you very much, Rafael. And Tuesday's event will be absolutely worthwhile attending. There's tons of information, tons of things to learn, and good news, bad news, but there's lots of good news. Next, we are going to have the very fine Flavio Mata, who's going to come up here and talk to us about a very interesting and exciting new development with BNDES. And I gave him exactly 15 minutes, so it's not enough for him to tell you everything he's going to talk about, so be sure and grab him and learn about what he's going to offer. Here you go. Thank you so much.
Just yeah. All right. So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is an honor to be here with you today, and I would like to extend my thanks to TSX for hosting this event. I would also like to thank Peter, Daniel, and Adriana from the Brazil-Canada Chamber of Commerce for organizing everything for us. Marcos Andrea and Professor Roberto Xavier from the Brazilian Mining Development and Innovation Agency for support all the Brazilian delegation. And of course, all of you who have joined us today. It is a great pleasure to participate in this meeting and to share with you an important step by the Brazilian Development Bank, BNDES, toward the sustainable production of mineral goods in Brazil. In our current global scenario, this step highlights the importance of various mineral goods for the transition to a low-carbon economy. The need to expand the production of mineral goods to meet the demands of decarbonization represents a great opportunity for positioning the mineral sector in Brazil as an important supplier of low-carbon materials, technologies, and solutions. This is an agenda that is fully incorporated in our commitment to sustainable development. For those of you who are unfamiliar with BNDES, we are one of the world's largest development banks. As a state bank, since our creation over 72 years ago, our institution has been providing long-term financing for the development of our economy, with a credit portfolio about $100 billion, plus another $14 billion in shareholders, either directly or via investment funds. We cover investments in all sectors of our economy, everything from industry to infrastructure, logistics, energy, and of course, the social and environment segments that are so important to our country. BNDES is proud to be recognized as the largest clean energy financer in the world. Our support has been paramount to transforming Brazil and building an energy and electricity network that is among the most renewable in the world. Financing Brazilian mining has been part of BNDES policy since the 1970s. We have supported investments in prospection and exploration of the mineral goods essential to industries, as well as having supported the development and implementation of new mines that have had a relevant impact on national productivity. These activities have enhanced the commercial and socio-economic development of regions of Brazil that are far from large urban centers, such as the mineral province of Carajás in the state of Pará. BNDES experience includes financing the country's largest iron ore projects, greenfield projects, and expansion of aluminum ore, copper, nickel, zinc, vanadium, and lithium, among others. In recent years, Brazilian mining has demonstrated an increasing commitment to safety and the social environment impacts of its activities, focused on the sustainable use of the country's mineral resource. Faced with the challenge of climate change and the growth in demand for critical minerals, Brazil is experiencing an expansion of project investment in the sector of around 30%, These minerals are essential to supporting clean technology at a global level and to expanding the capacity of this industry in the country. On January 22nd this year, the Brazilian government released the new industrial policy entitled Nova Indústria Brasil. This new agenda places industry at the center of the country's development strategy. Under this new policy, six missions have been defined. 3 of them have a direct relationship with the sustainable production of mineral goods. This policy was defined after discussion between government and industrial players, together with the National Industrial Development Council. Among the relevant missions, Mission 1 is to develop sustainable and digital agro-industrial chains for food and nutritional and energy security, which includes, among others, the objective of reducing dependence upon imports and of supporting national fertilizer production, which make phosphate and potassium as a national priority. Mission 3 is for sustainable infrastructure, sanitation, housing and mobility for productive integration and well-being of cities, which includes the objective of strengthening national production chains for construction and infrastructure works, prioritizing sustainable minerals and materials. And Mission 5, which is for bioeconomy, decarbonization, and energy transition and security to guarantee resource for the future generations. With this agenda, our objective is to expand the productive capacity of Brazilian industry by producing and adopting critical materials and minerals, low carbon technology, and processes that are energy efficient. The policy foresees some $60 billion in financing by 2026. Within this action plan for the Brazilian government, now officially, I'm very proud to announce the latest private equity fund by BNDES for strategic minerals, which is our main agenda during this PDAC convention. Thank you. The new fund will have the objective of fostering new minerals projects considering strategic for energy transition, decarbonization, and food security. This will be BNDES' first participation in an investment fund dedicated to mining projects. The estimate is to mobilize $200 million to finance projects in the mineral exploration phase, feasibility studies, development and implementation of new mines in the country. BNDES, through its investment arms in shareholders and investment funds, BNDES PAR, will contribute up to 250 million reais, about $50 million, with participation limited to 25% of the fund's capital, which we expect will include other Brazilian and international investors. So all of you are very welcome to participate with us in this initiative in this fund. The new fund manager will be selected through a public call for proposal to be held by May of this year, in 2 months. And the chosen managing partner will have independence in making investment decisions, of course, respecting our teams of investment. This is a model that counts on BNDES PAR extensive experience in structuring investment funds. The fund is expected to make investment in 15 to 20 companies with mineral research projects as well as development and implementation of new strategic mineral minings in Brazil, of which at least 20% of the fund's research will be directed to mineral exploration projects that represent the greatest risks and difficulty in raising funds. Among the strategic minerals for energy transition and decarbonization are copper, rare earth, nickel, graphite, manganese, cobalt, zinc, vanadium, uranium, silicon, and platinum group minerals. In soil fertilization and sustainable food production, minerals such as phosphate and potassium stand out. The investment will be directly mainly toward junior companies. Medium-sized companies that already have operating mining may also be eligible, as long as the investment in new mining projects. Brazil is a country of continental proportion, with a resource potential to match. We have qualified suppliers for mining industry, one of the most renewable energy network in the world, and the political stability that have prepared the ground to meet the global demand for minerals. We also have the technology to lead the world in a low-carbon transition, as well as to play a leading role in the world's food security. At BNDES, our goal is to foster the production of strategic minerals with a focus on innovation and sustainability, which are the pillars of Brazilian industrial policy. We invite you to get more details on the funds and about our strategy. We are welcome to join us tomorrow at the Brazilian Mining Day with a presentation at 2:45 p.m. and a panel at 4:25 p.m. just here in this room, right? It will be a pleasure and it will be a great pleasure to have you join us. Thank you very much.
That's good. And next, we're going to hear from Rodrigo Cota, who is the Director of Mineral Transformation and Technology, the Brazilian Ministry of Mines and Energy, who is going to share with us about the new Brazilian powerhouse. I called it that. I didn't even ask him. Come, sir. Thank
you. Okay. Now, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I have to be fast and furious. Now you're listening to me. I have to be fast and furious in honor of the time, in honor of the Peter, and the hunger. Okay. We are at the National Secretariat of Mining in the Ministry of Mines and Energy. I'm going to tell you one thing that you don't know yet, but believe in me, the world needs desperately the critical minerals for the energy transition. But the good news is Brazil has reserves of all critical minerals. I'd like to highlight the reserve of lithium, copper, nickel, rare earths, cobalt. Cobalt's a little reserve, but we have, and graphite. According to the International Energy Agency, in the report of 2023, the critical minerals are lithium, copper, nickel, rare earth, cobalt, and graphite. And it's important to highlight that in graphite, we have the second largest reserve in the world, and in rare earth, we have the third largest reserve in the world. And the main supplier of these two group of minerals is China, that is restraining the export of these minerals. So Brazil probably will be, in the next month, a very important player for these minerals. I have to register here that in the end of the last year, Brazil, the Serra Verde minerals, made the first shipment of rare earth departing from Americas in history. We have ongoing projects for all these minerals. I point out the Grota Cirilo, that is the Sigma Lithium project on lithium, but also we have projects in rare earth, nickel, and so on. And what the Brazilian government, the Brazilian current administration wants to do in order that Brazil can meet the demand of the world mineral critical minerals. Prioritization of analysis and approvals necessary for the granting of minerals research or mineral exploration, as you prefer, and mining rights for critical minerals. Prioritization of these minerals in geological mapping, geophysical and geochemical surveys, and mineral potential assessment studies. That is the work made by our geological services, SGB. Offer of financial support by official banks and funding agents for investment in mineral research and mining in Brazil. That is the work of BNDES mainly. Development of the necessary infrastructure for the economic exploitation of the minerals. And, I miss it, we are launching a program called Mining for Clean Energy in the next month. In fact, we are already working in according to the guidelines of the program and just waiting for the right political moment to formally announce the program. But Brazil wants and will meet the global demand for critical minerals, but also wants and will add value to them. I have to stress this. There's no problem for us to be a mineral exporter, raw material exporter, but we see the opportunity to add value to these minerals. The refining industry for these minerals is nowadays in China. Europeans and Americans doesn't want to depend on China for their batteries global value chains, batteries value chains. So Brazil is a good choice, a very good choice for Americans and Europeans to invest. This industry needs cutting-edge technologies, skilled workforce, and a large volume of clean energy. Brazil has it all. This is a value chain for lithium-ion battery. We have already the minerals, we have the production of some products from the refining of these minerals in technical grade, but we are aiming in the development of the industry for battery grade, that is in the red circle. This is our huge network of technical centers, technological centers in Brazil, all linked to Embrapa, that's a very important body in Brazil in charge of promotion, the investment in R&D and innovation. And what are we going to do to process minerals in Brazil, to attract the refining of this mineral in Brazil? We are going to stimulate research, development, and innovation in mining and mineral processing. We are reinforcing the providing of skilled workforce training. We are going to enable the provision of financial support by BNDES, of course, for the investment in mineral processing in Brazil. We are going to negotiate agreements with other governments for access to market, integration into global battery value chains. We are seeking this, and we are going to engage in investments attraction with the important help of Apex Brazil, that's here. I think that you may find a very good choice of countries to invest in South America for the purpose of critical minerals. But Brazil is by far, hands-off, the best choice in the world for processing critical minerals in the battery value chain. Let's start with the political scenario. We have strong institutions. We have balance and harmony among the branches of the government, the branches of the state. We have a robust and modern democracy, a little bit noisy, but very stable. In the macroeconomic and macro-fiscal scenario, we have a stable and growing economy. We have effective monetary policy with inflation within the target. We have high employment level, falling interest rates, still high, but falling. Stabilized exchange rate with a high level of foreign exchange reserve. We have $350 billion of foreign reserves, of international reserves. We have an approved and credible legal framework for fiscal policy with a target of zero fiscal deficit in 2024. And we have account risk decreasing very fastly. In the business environment, I have to remind you that Brazil has good diplomatic relations with the whole world. Absolute respect for free enterprise and contracts, a modern labor legislation, a robust and productive judicial systems, yes. We have one of the most modern banking systems on the planet. Who lives in Brazil knows how easy it is to make financial transactions there in Brazil, and we have an independent central bank. We have an extensive network of specialized consulting firms on various subjects. We have availability of high-level professionals. It was already said today. We have the second better digital government in Brazil. A tax system that is in process of simplification with the reform of our tax system. And we do not have adverse climatic phenomena. We don't have earthquakes, we don't have hurricanes, and so on. Well, the business environment in mining, the subsoil belongs to the Federal Union, is exploited and exploited. Under concession, we have a stable and very lasting legal framework. We have professional and well-prepared regulators, here represented by our national mining agents, and legal certainty and predictability. And this is very important. We have a very robust electrical system with a clean energy matrix. Our matrix has 87% of renewables versus 28% in the world. Almost all energy consumed in Brazil is clean. We have 11.2 billion transmission auctions, $11.2 billion transmission auctions in the next 12 months. We have wind and solar generations that will double in volume. The sector has been vertically disintegrated and decentralized since 1990s. The electricity sector has robust regulation and independent professional regulator, that is ANEEL. investment in the sector through competitive auction for generation and transmission, and a nationally integrated electrical system which mitigate risk of regional shortages. 26 out of 27 states in Brazil are integrated in the same grid of electric power. Our energy system will increase will grow in the next years. We expect an expansion. We expect an expansion until 2027. 41.7 gigawatts in generation, 14.4 thousand kilometers of transmission line, and so on. I have to speed up. We have a robustness of we have an infrastructure very robust. Railways, highways, waterways, ports, internet, 5G in more than half the country, and so on. So the Brazilian mining industry will be increasingly faster, greener, safer, more global, sustainable, and socially just. These are the values that are orienting our work. And this slide is not mine. It's a slide that belongs to Serra Verde, a foreign company that is investing in Brazil in rare earth. And I asked for the authorization of Mr. Trais Moratis to use this slide here. I was thinking that it would be a novelty for you here, but most of the panelists of the last panel has already told you about it. Serra Verde says, we have found several of these advantages in Brazil. Proven and established mining jurisdiction, skilled workforce, supportive and knowledgeable communities, experienced contractors, available renewable energy, good infrastructure, and skilled and professional regulators. So this is my final message. If Americans, Canadians, Europeans, they forgot to put the Canadians there. It's a very serious mistake. If Americans, Europeans, Canadians, Chinese, Japanese, and the rest of the world are truly committed to the energy transition, they must allocate investment in Brazil for the process of battery inputs, because we have clean energy. We have a very powerful and competitive workforce, and we have all the minerals. Thank you so much.
We have our final panel, and I'm very excited. Sorry about the little hitch with the electricity. I think we might have had a surge of excitement around Ricardo's presentation. So our next panel, of course, is the views from the Brazilian government, and our moderator is the wonderful Marcos Gonçalves, who's the president of ANB. Come on up, Marcos. And Mauro Souza, who is general director at the Brazil National Mining Agency, ANM. Vem aqui. And Francisco Valdir Silveira, Director of Geology and Mineral Sources at the Brazilian Geological Survey. They're all coming up, and they're going to share some wonderful insights for us. And please take a chair. Yes, take your chair and be comfortable.
I am.
Gentlemen?
I'm fine.
I'm setting everybody else up, too. Marcos, is somebody giving a presentation first, or we're just going to talk directly?
Yeah, I'll just introduce them.
Lovely. They can do what they might. The microphone's beside you. Okay.
Hello. This panel will go in Portuguese, just to make it easy for the panelists. There's translation. Your sets, someone eventually wants that. Bom, boa tarde a todos. Marcos André Gonçalves, presidente do Conselho da ADIM. Um prazer, acho que muita coisa já foi dito de Brasil aqui, né? E da importância, né? Os nossos panelistas hoje, Dr. Mauro Souza, diretor-geral da ANM, todos conhecem. Terceiro ano aqui, né, Mauro? Fantástico, assim, comprometido, comparecendo. Valdir Silveira, diretor de Geologia do Serviço Geológico Brasileiro, CPRM, com uma equipe grande, a maior delegação do CPRM ao PDAC esse ano. Numa indiscrição, talvez não, gostaria de cumprimentar o Carvalhal, Companhia Brasileira de Pesquisa Mineral também. E por que eu estou fazendo questão disso? Porque eu entendo que nós estamos num momento muito interessante, para além dos metais básicos, para além do ferro, uma coisa que já foi discutido muitas vezes em muitos PDACs, em muitos CIMEX-MINs no Brasil, que é como a gente aproximar a mineração do consumidor, como aproximar do ecossistema financeiro. E eu acho que a ANM e o Serviço Geológico têm um papel importante. Como a DIMB, nós entendemos e temos muito claro que não há saída fora de um regime ou de regimes de colaboração puro sangue, colaboração híbridos. Isso é importante. Valdir tem algumas informações para passar, uma apresentação, e eu acredito que a gente começa com essa apresentação e depois eu queria propor um tema, né, para a gente desenrolar essa discussão. Por favor, Valdir. Você vai falar dali? Sim.
First of all, good afternoon, everyone. I will be my words in português. Bom dia, boa tarde a todos e todas. É com grande honra que represento o Serviço Geológico do Brasil neste momento de especial importância para o setor mineral brasileiro. Quero cumprimentar o embaixador Carlos França, a cônsul-geral do Brasil, Vânia Nóbrega, em nome dos quais eu saudo todos os presentes militantes do setor mineral. Agradecimento especial vai para o presidente do Conselho Superior da ADIMB, meu colega Marcos André Gonçalves, agraciado com a honrosa missão de coordenar a delegação oficial do Brasil aqui no PDAC. É com grande entusiasmo que estou aqui hoje para compartilhar com vocês a história, missão e contribuição do Serviço Geológico do Brasil ao longo de seus 54 anos de existência, bem como seu papel na promoção da transição energética e da segurança alimentar em um modelo de mineração segura, sustentável e de baixa emissão de carbono. Desde sua criação, o Serviço Geológico do Brasil tem desempenhado um papel crucial na identificação e avaliação dos recursos minerais do Brasil. Sua missão principal é fornecer informações geológicas e hidrológicas confiáveis, promover o conhecimento do potencial mineral do país e contribuir para o desenvolvimento econômico e social por meio de uma gestão responsável dos recursos minerais. Ao longo das décadas, o Serviço Geológico do Brasil tem conduzido uma ampla gama de projetos que abrangem desde o mapeamento geológico até a pesquisa mineral e o desenvolvimento de tecnologias inovadoras, a exemplo da inteligência artificial aplicada hoje nos modelos preditivos. Esses projetos não apenas impulsionam o crescimento econômico do Brasil, mas também fornecem as bases para uma mineração forte, mas que precisa ocupar seu lugar de destaque, o lugar que merece. No entanto, à medida que enfrentamos desafios globais, como as mudanças climáticas e a escassez de recursos, o papel do Serviço Geológico do Brasil se torna ainda mais crucial em um mundo em transição para fontes de energia renovável e sistemas alimentares mais sustentáveis. Neste contexto, o Serviço Geológico do Brasil se torna peça-chave na identificação e avaliação dos minerais críticos para essa indústria emergente. A transição energética requer uma série de minerais, de minérios, de metais, que fornecem desde os elementos lítio e o cobalto para baterias de íon lítio, até o grafeno e o silício para painéis solares e tecnologias e de tecnologia de armazenamento de energia. Abro um parênteses aqui. Nesse momento, olhamos muito para mudança da nossa matriz veicular, da matriz de transporte. Porém, também temos que pensar que a gente está no momento de uma corrida aeroespacial e outros bens minerais precisam ser olhados com muita atenção. Posso citar elementos que não estão na linha hoje do nosso governo, mas que o Serviço Geológico do Brasil tem o papel de alertar. Precisaremos de titânio, precisaremos de tungstênio, precisaremos de berílio e precisaremos de molibdênio muito em breve. O Serviço Geológico do Brasil, ele é a base da pesquisa e da exploração destes recursos. Ou seja, nós estamos lá na base da atividade mineral, garantindo que o Brasil se firme cada vez mais na economia global como um grande gerador de energia limpa. Isso já foi falado aqui várias vezes, principalmente foi reforçado pelo colega Rodrigo Cota. Além disso, o Serviço Geológico do Brasil também está comprometido com a promoção da segurança alimentar por meio de uma mineração responsável. Os agros minerais e fertilizantes utilizados na agricultura moderna são essenciais. E o Serviço Geológico do Brasil trabalha para identificar e avaliar recursos, garantindo que possamos alimentar uma população em crescimento de forma sustentável e responsável. Também trabalhamos para fornecer informações sobre o potencial das províncias minerais brasileiras, os depósitos minerais existentes e os recursos disponíveis, de modo a colocar em destaque o potencial geológico do país para continuar a ser um grande produtor de minerais e, sem dúvida, seremos um grande player na transição energética. Nosso papel, enquanto Serviço Geológico, a exemplo de outros, também é compartilhar com a comunidade científica e o setor produtivo as informações técnicas geradas no território nacional. E, para isso, anuncio a vocês que o Serviço Geológico, lá no nosso pavilhão, vai disponibilizar uma plataforma onde vocês terão, de forma transparente e com muita rapidez, uma plataforma amigável, que você vai saber exatamente quanto o nosso país foi mapeado nas várias escalas, levando a todos os projetos que foi realizado nos últimos 54 anos do Serviço Geológico, o nosso plano de trabalho atual e o plano de trabalho para os próximos 10 anos. Além disso, estabelecemos parcerias estratégicas com instituições nacionais e internacionais para fomentar o desenvolvimento geocientífico. E estas parcerias estão materializadas em nossa delegação, composta por aqueles que estão na ponta do nosso negócio. Tive a preocupação de trazer para esse evento o nosso dito chão de fábrica. Aqui eu tenho um geofísico, eu tenho um geoquímico, eu tenho um gerente regional, eu tenho uma chefe de departamento de recursos minerais e toda a área de suporte que, no pavilhão do Serviço Geológico do Brasil, estarão à disposição para recebê-los e tratar de todas as informações que possam ser procuradas. Em resumo, o Serviço Geológico do Brasil desempenha um papel vital da promoção de uma transição energética segura transição energética e segurança alimentar por meio de uma mineração segura e sustentável. Ao longo de seus 54 anos de história, temos trabalhado incansavelmente para cumprir nossa missão e promover o futuro mais sustentável para o Brasil e para o mundo. Aproveito o momento para dizer que vamos retomar os levantamentos aerogeofísicos paralisados lá em 2015 de todo o território nacional. Ou seja, vamos complementar aquilo que não foi feito nas áreas cristalinas e iremos, em todos os aerolevantamentos com a resolução de 500 metros, fazer linhas intercaladas para a gente baixar a resolução para 250 metros. Ainda está na nossa proposição levantar as áreas mais importantes do país com levantamentos eletromagnéticos. Além de geoquímica exploratória, que estamos retomando também, e os levantamentos e projetos temáticos dentro do nosso portfólio. Vocês poderiam até perguntar, de onde vai sair o dinheiro? O Congresso Nacional entendeu esse ano que o Serviço Geológico do Brasil precisa e necessita de recursos. Então, foi acenado para a área de geofísica 250 milhões fora do nosso orçamento do nosso passado pelo Tesouro. Então, isso é uma sinalização que esse governo que está aí dá, sim, atenção ao setor mineral e o Serviço Geológico do Brasil tem muita clareza do que tem que fazer e a gente sabe como fazer. Muito obrigado.
Obrigado, Valdir. Bom, nós vimos aqui por todas o painel e todas as sessões do dia de hoje que realmente a transição energética é algo transformativo, chegou para ficar e tem tido seu impacto. Se a gente pensar, Mauro e Valdir, que há 5 anos atrás era um tique no total de investimentos em pesquisa mineral, o investimento para terras raras, por exemplo, e que em cerca de 5 anos hoje, nós estamos falando de algo que se aproxima de 10%. A figura é em torno de 8%, 9%. A gente examina o cenário do lítio no Brasil, uma série de novos players, uma série de investimentos, um certo movimento de consolidação, né, para o investidor que está chegando. A gente fica muito claro o interesse de estrangeiros e casas de investimento nacional em entender melhor as possibilidades nesse espaço, né? A aposta grande continua, níquel, cobre, a gente isso não vai deixar de... Mas tem uma outra dinâmica. Como é que... Eu começo pelo Dr. Mauro. Como é que a ANM vê... porque isso já está gerando uma demanda, e nós temos a boa notícia da retomada dos leilões. Então, nós falamos de 2 iniciativas que foram muito positivas. Lá em 2013, 15, que foi... na época, a retomada dos levantamentos aerogeofísicos, e claramente se observa falando e focando mais no cenário inicial da pesquisa mineral. Era bastante claro que havia uma correlação positiva, os novos requerimentos de pesquisa, novos investimentos em pesquisa foram exatamente para essas áreas. E no segundo momento, a oferta pública, as 6 primeiras, né, acho que fica claro que foi um sucesso em termos de arrecadação de recursos e de disponibilização desse estoque de área que a gente sabe que ele é volumoso, né? Como é que o senhor vê a necessidade e pode contar um pouco para a gente, um pouco mais em detalhe, como vai ser essa oferta, a prioridade vai ser dada para os minerais da transição energética, especialmente minerais chamados críticos, né? E Valdir já deu spoiler, já falou dos levantamentos, acho que isso é importante, mas como é que vocês veem, né? Porque vai ter uma necessidade de uma certa rapidez do regulador para tramitar esses processos, né? O que mais se fala no Brasil, assim, a mão de obra tem, nós já vimos, qualificada, talvez a técnica ainda seja um desafio, né? Coisas mais operador de máquina, empilhadeira, técnico laboratórios, mas assim, é um fazer diferente do que a gente está acostumado, eu pelo menos venho da mineração de metais básicos, platinóides. Tem suas peculiaridades você fazer e desenvolver projetos em terras raras, em lítio, vai por outro caminho, em grafita. Como é que vocês podem comentar um pouco sobre isso? Como a agência está pensando né, no que tange a disponibilização dessas áreas, né? Existe uma prioridade, não existe?
Boa tarde a todos e todas. É bem importante, primeiro, agradecer novamente a oportunidade e elogiar a apresentação do nosso colega Valdir, trouxe essa panorâmica do trabalho da CPRM. Inicialmente, pegando um gancho do que ele falou, primeiro vamos para a questão, digamos, macro, né? E ele trouxe um elemento importante. Anteriormente, o Dr. Rodrigo Cota informou a todos que o bem mineral no Brasil, conforme a Constituição, ele pertence à União, né? E eu costumo dizer que, para além do bem em si, o conhecimento geológico também é um ativo do país, aliás, de qualquer país. É como a gente consegue conhecer o que nós temos, exercer a nossa soberania e participar no mundo com o poder geopolítico que tem. E agora, falando de minerais críticos, isso está mais acentuado, né? Principalmente se você olhar os países da Europa que não têm reservas, não têm produção e necessitam, estão num nível de escala de desenvolvimento econômico muito superior ao que nós temos na América Latina, mesmo sendo o Brasil uma das 10, agora chegou novamente, uma das 10 economias do mundo, a gente ainda precisa avançar bastante para tirar esse gap. Então, nós temos aí, olhando para dentro de casa, e sem querer dourar pílula alguma, a estrutura da agência ela não permite que nós façamos prognósticos mais alvissareiros, mais auspiciosos, pelo menos nesse primeiro momento. Tá? Nós temos, hoje, em torno de quase 100 mil processos nas várias fases, processos minerários, tanto da fase de pesquisa, quanto das fases intermediárias e, especialmente, em torno de 20 mil processos em análise de plano de aproveitamento econômico. Isso representa investimento. Para a gente, há um custo também institucional muito grande por não termos essa condição ideal de apresentar com mais celeridade as nossas considerações. Portanto, em relação a isso, estamos estudando a possibilidade, temos discutido bastante com o Ministério de Minas e Energia, novas sistemáticas de abordagem com relação, por exemplo, à acreditação de profissionais e empresas que possam trazer para dentro da agência as avaliações e que a gente prescinda dos nossos servidores para que eles possam dedicar atividades mais nobres, digamos assim, mais essa parte operacional, de análise de resultado, relatório final de pesquisa ou de plano de aproveitamento econômico, ele seja feito por profissionais ou empresas credenciadas que possam fazer esse trabalho, que a gente apenas faça com que o investimento aconteça e a gente atue na parte da fiscalização. Isso acho que é muito mais racional para a gente. Tá? Do ponto de vista do que se dá hoje com relação aos minerais críticos, aí nós temos uma gama de minerais que podem ser considerados críticos ou estratégicos, a terminologia varia. Nos Estados Unidos, por exemplo, eles podem chegar a uma pauta de 35 elementos. No Brasil, a gente tem muito menos que isso, mas temos uma dependência, como foi falado aqui, na parte de minerais para a agricultura, sendo nós, contraditoriamente a isso, um país que se vangloria de alimentar boa parte do mundo, com um agronegócio robusto, mas que não conseguiu ter uma política decisiva, definitiva, com relação a esse segmento da mineração, que é fundamental para garantir a segurança alimentar. E aí, nós, como executores de política pública, aí falando da agência, nós precisamos realmente ter esses inputs do mundo político e do desenho da política que vai ser empregada no país. E é importante a fala do Rodrigo, porque ele traz esse panorama muito claro do que pretende o governo em termos de tratamento da questão que hoje é candente no mundo todo, de prover esses minerais não só para o país, mas para o mundo, e garantir essa transição energética. E aí, nesse contexto, nós não estamos a falar apenas da produção minerária em si, mas de toda a cadeia, de toda a industrialização que tem que acontecer numa rede de fornecimento que realmente faça com que o país também apresente produtos. E nós temos um exemplo que é muito de sucesso no país, que é a questão do nióbio. O nióbio, nós temos uma única empresa, não única não, mas temos a empresa que produz, mas ela sempre, no DNA dela, já esteve presente que ela vai trazer um produto inovador necessariamente, e não simplesmente fornecer ao mundo o nióbio em si. Então, nós precisamos, para concluir essa primeira intervenção, ter esse norte muito claro do que é a política minerária para minerais críticos especialmente, para que nós possamos adaptar internamente as nossas resoluções e a nossa formatação de como atuar, privilegiando ou dando prioridade a esses processos que são mais sensíveis e necessários para que a gente não seja um empecilho para que a indústria se desenvolva. Isso é um incômodo para a gente quando nós nos deparamos com... Temos aqui vários investidores e representantes de empresas com quem nós temos conversado, e às vezes a gente percebe a angústia, às vezes até uma trend que vai sair no financiamento, uma tranche, melhor dizendo, no financiamento, ou está buscando um IPO e tem algo dentro da agência que ainda está sendo difícil de superar. Então, para a gente, nós temos um desafio também interno de melhorar os nossos processos, melhorar os nossos procedimentos e, principalmente, alterar substancialmente o nosso modelo mental, porque nós não conseguimos fazer, já que a expressão do dia é transição, nós não conseguimos ainda fazer a transição do modelo organizacional do então DNPM, Departamento Nacional de Produção Mineral, que precedeu a ANM, para adquirir uma identidade própria de agência, com o exercício de todas as suas competências e capacidades, principalmente a sua capacidade técnica plena, para que ela não seja um dificultador para a atividade, mas sim um fomentador para a atividade.
Obrigado, Mauro. Valdir, teria algum comentário em cima disso? Você diria que o driver aí para os novos levantamentos, ele é minerais críticos, ou são novos levantamentos numa abordagem mais, vamos fazer uma nova cobertura com a EM, enfim. O ponto aqui é a urgência, né? É um pouco na linha de que tem muito dinheiro entrando, tem novos players, bastante empresa no Brasil chegando, e 10 em cada 10 interessados estão atrás de minerais vinculados à transição energética. Esses levantamentos são focados, são mais abrangentes ou são focados, são pensados nisso também?
Marcos, a gente como instituição de Estado, a gente tem que pensar no primeiro momento de forma abrangente, porém a gente tem que se adaptar e atender o que o momento também pede. Então, a gente tem essas várias situações dentro do nosso programa, agindo como instituição de Estado, ou seja, a gente não está só pensando nos minerais, que aí existe uma confusão realmente, que o que é mineral estratégico e mineral crítico. Mineral crítico para o Brasil, por exemplo, só tem fosfato e o potássio. Os demais são minerais estratégicos, porque a gente tem vantagens econômicas sobre eles. Isso fica muito claro, o que é crítico é para o mundo. Tá? Então, e a gente tem essa oportunidade de trabalhar em cima disso aí. Nosso portfólio de projetos, ele não está preso à nossa demanda de momento. A gente tem um portfólio de projetos que atende todos os bens minerais que o Brasil possa produzir. Esse é o papel do Serviço Geológico e a gente está muito antenado sobre isso. Inclusive, quando se fala agora, a gente tem que estar antenado em material para a construção civil também, porque a gente tem grandes cidades, a gente tem que pensar nisso. A gente está focado em dar possibilidade da gente ter agrominerais e minerais fosfatados próximo ao nosso produtor, a nossa demanda da agricultura. Os nossos levantamentos geoquímicos, nossos mapeamentos, ele tem uma programação de longo prazo, contudo, ele vai atender esse nicho. Então, por exemplo, a gente precisa finalizar aquilo que a gente começou em 2000, o último levantamento foi em 2015, eu estava à frente do Departamento de Recursos Minerais e foi o último voo que nós levantamos. A gente precisa terminar, são 3 voos que faltam para a gente ter 100% do cristalino voado no Brasil, com resolução de 500 metros. O que a gente está pensando? Nós podemos aumentar essa resolução para 250 metros, intercalando linhas de voos de 250 metros, dentro do modelo, da metodologia de Mag e Gama. Vamos deixar o Brasil todo cristalino, com a escala de 1 para 250 entre linhas. A gente agora, até um tempo bem recente, o serviço geológico não podia trabalhar em bacias sedimentares. E agora é nosso papel. A gente vai voar as bacias sedimentares, no primeiro momento, com resolução de 1.000 metros, ou seja, se não tem nada, a gente não tem nada para 1.000 metros, isso é muito bom. Além disso, a gente quer todas as áreas de relevante potencial mineral do país, a gente fazer levantamentos com tecnologias mais modernas, que seria utilizar a EM, e a gente está trabalhando para isso. Então, a gente, como eu disse, o serviço geológico tem expertise nisso, sabe o que fazer e como fazer. Agora, a gente tem a oportunidade de ter o Congresso Nacional reconhecendo e nos passando recursos. Desses 250 milhões que foi prometido, a gente já tem 36 milhões que já foi, que está, vamos dizer assim, pronto para ser usado, fora o nosso programa normal, anual, que a gente tem, tá? E a gente vê que existe uma demanda forte do setor que termina com o governo, começa a escutar o setor e diz, de fato, o serviço geológico é aquele que cria todo um alicerce para que, em cima desse alicerce, sejam estabelecidos os grandes projetos, os projetos maduros, e que chegue lá no final a gente ter depósitos econômicos, é isso que a gente quer. Então, é desse jeito que a gente está trabalhando. Você sabe, eu já estive do lado de lá, eu sou uma pessoa, eu trabalhei na Anglo-América durante um tempo, trabalhei na BNDES durante bastante tempo e há 20 anos estou no serviço geológico, ou seja, eu conheço os dois lados da moeda. A gente lá, com a expertise que a gente tem no serviço geológico, a gente sabe o que fazer e como fazer. Precisamos, sim, de pessoal mais para aumentar o nosso corpo técnico e de recursos para a gente levar adiante todos os projetos, todas as demandas de governo e de Estado que a gente tem para fazer.
Perfeito, Valdir, obrigado. Temos 1 minuto e meio, deixo para o Dr. Mauro, se tiver alguma observação que queira fazer. Eu acredito que é a tônica, né? Toda essa correria, né, para ver quem bebe água primeiro, né? No final das contas é um pouco isso. Mas fique à vontade.
Obrigado, Marcos. Quem bebe água primeiro, né? No Brasil vige o princípio da prioridade, né? Quem chega primeiro leva no setor mineral, mas assim, leva o quê? E aí volta a grande questão: que Estado nós queremos, que sociedade nós queremos? Volto à grande discussão que se trava, que eu apontei mais cedo, sobre a percepção, sobre a imagem da mineração no país, que precisa melhorar bastante. Isso é fundamental, mas não só do ponto de vista do governo patrocinar isso, mas a própria sociedade tem que ser alertada para essa necessidade. Então, a gente está discutindo com um senso mais pragmático, até de uma aproximação maior, porque no Brasil também nós temos uma cultura de separar muito o que é o público do que é o privado, e parece que às vezes há um antagonismo, e que essa não é a melhor tônica. A melhor tônica é aproximar, é dialogar, é buscar caminhos e construir soluções conjuntamente. Então, é uma construção coletiva, e a sociedade entra nisso. Nessas discussões todas, que a gente tem que transitar por questão de tributária, fazer o balanço entre royalty e tributação na mineração, como é que a gente industrializa mais toda a cadeia, e nós não temos fornecedores de muitos dos itens necessários, tem que saber estimular quem vem para o país, e não é só o que vai produzir o minério em si, mas quem vai desenvolver toda a cadeia. Temos que fazer uma reflexão já de antemão sobre a questão ambiental, não só o ESG que está na moda, mas nós temos, não só no Brasil, mas no mundo todo, milhares e milhares de minas abandonadas, minas que não foram objetivamente, de forma adequada, trabalhadas ao final. Nós hoje temos uma regulação muito importante com relação ao fechamento de mina, mas, de um modo geral, nós temos isso. E aí nós estamos falando do incremento de produção, especialmente para baterias, para a eletromobilidade, e que vão trazer um nível significativo de resíduos finais, né? Então, se a gente falar do princípio do berço ao túmulo, quem é que vai trabalhar isso? Como nós vamos poder reciclar? Então, é uma discussão que a gente tem que trazer logo agora, pensando nesse day after, porque essa transição, e a palavra já assim o diz, ela indica um senso de temporalidade, até que a gente consiga estabelecer qual é o caminho, quais são os caminhos. Mas a gente precisa pensar nesse dia subsequente de como nós vamos lidar com tudo o que vai ser gerado e que vai ser rejeitado, digamos assim, em relação a essa ultraprodução de elementos para garantir esse nível de vida que a gente quer, cada vez com mais qualidade, com mais segurança, com mais sustentabilidade. E aí, essa reflexão, ela tem que ser feita logo, para que a gente saiba como a gente vai percorrer esse caminho e chegar do outro lado sem olhar para trás dizendo o que nós não fizemos. Então, acho que esse é um desafio também, e a parte de regulação ela tem que estar atenta a isso para ir modulando a sua regulação conforme o segmento, conforme as necessidades e sem perder de vista esse day after de que eu falo. Obrigado.
Vou encerrar, Valdir, vou encerrar.
Eu quero 1 minuto da atenção, e essa minha fala final se destina aos céus das empresas que trabalham no Brasil. Vocês sabem que todos os dados que nós produzimos são públicos. Isso é fato e está disponível no Serviço Geológico do Brasil, lá para ser feito download a qualquer momento. Então, seja ele CNPJ ou seja CPF, ele chega lá e tira todos os dados. Então, eu queria falar com aquelas pessoas que têm poder de decisão nas empresas, que muitas vezes passam por áreas, produzem muitos dados e depois eles deixam as áreas. Eu acho que o melhor local de se guardar dados que foram adquiridos em áreas que foram descartadas é o Serviço Geológico do Brasil. Porque no momento seguinte, esse mesmo dado, junto com todos os dados, podem voltar para essa empresa. E esse é um dos grandes problemas. Marcos aqui é um que a gente já conversou sobre isso. Ele esteve trabalhando com uma 10ª empresa numa área e que não existia nenhum dado dessa área. Se esse dado, as empresas que saíram da área tivessem nos passado, ele tinha recebido uma quantidade de dados que ele teria acrescentado mais dados. Quer dizer, a gente tem jogado muito dinheiro fora por essa falta de, eu acho, de conversa, entendimento entre o Serviço Geológico ou entre os órgãos de governo e as empresas. E eu coloco-me aqui que o Serviço Geológico, todos os nossos funcionários, eles são funcionários de vocês também. Vocês precisam utilizar melhor o Serviço Geológico do Brasil. Obrigado.
Obrigado, Valdir. Agora de volta com o Daniel.
Thank you. Okay, so that brings us to the end of the PDAC Mining Brunch put on by the BCC and Najimbi. So thank you very much to everybody for attending today. I always like to wrap it up very briefly with one quick thing. The TSX didn't put it up today, but they have a great slide where they have a number of mining companies listed by country. And every year we get a little bit closer to Argentina, but we still haven't passed them yet. So my ask of you today is to have a great rest of your PDAC so that next year when we're up here, we can get the slide with Brazil with more mines listed on the TSX than Argentina has. So thank you, and have a good afternoon.